Chapter 341. Madame Pomfrey informed me that to prevent any mishaps among the three of you, she placed you in separate wards and prohibited visits when you were out of her sight. Clearly, you didn't heed her instructions, Professor McGonagall said sternly, her gaze fixed on Harry and Ron, who were hastily getting up. Her tone was laced with disappointment. Harry and Ron could only attribute their predicament to bad luck, having no other excuse. "Oh, Professor McGonagall," Hermione stammered. "They came to ask me about lessons." She gestured to the parchment that covered 2/3 of the bedside table, her hands trembling slightly. "You know, we haven't had classes for a week, and we're worried about falling behind. So, when we're not under medical care, we preview the new material." It was evident that those with excellent academic records were more convincing liars than those with poorer grades. Harry was certain that if he or Ron had made the same claim, Professor McGonagall's expression would not have softened. "Very well," Professor McGonagall said, her shoulders relaxing slightly. She misinterpreted the fear in Harry and Ron's eyes as concern about keeping up with their studies. At breakfast, Poppy left early to inspect the three of you, so she missed the headmaster's announcement. "Albus believes," she paused, observing the eager anticipation in the eyes of the three young wizards. Her stern demeanor melted into a smile. "He believes a week of quarantine is sufficient to assure everyone of your safety. It's time for you to return to Gryffindor." Harry knew he should be more reserved, as Hermione had suggested. Their only real achievement that night was capturing Pettigrew Peter, a feat that couldn't be openly acknowledged. In his mind, they had undoubtedly gotten into trouble for breaking school rules. Yet, he couldn't suppress a grin. He had spent nights in the school hospital before, but none as long or challenging as this. He missed the 4-poster bed in his dormitory, his roommates, his firebolt, and Quidditch. He even swore that if it meant leaving the hospital and returning to Gryffindor, he would endure 8 potions lessons with Professor Snape a week. Or, perhaps, a divination class with Professor Trelawney, preferably divination, since he had finally unraveled the mystery of the large dog he had seen on Magnolia Crescent. He no longer feared the professor's ominous predictions. "Of course, I personally think it would be more appropriate for you to leave tomorrow morning," Professor McGonagall continued, instantly dampening the joy of the three young wizards. "One more thing, Miss Granger," Professor McGonagall said, glancing at the latest issue of Wizard Weekly on the bed, unconcerned about how they had obtained the magazine during quarantine. "This morning, I received a letter from Atticus Blaine. He informed me about your broken time-turner." At this, Professor McGonagall's anger flared again. She intended to reprimand Hermione for not reporting the damage immediately. However, seeing Hermione's clenched fists and the worry in Harry and Ron's eyes, she sighed softly and spoke solemnly. "Atticus told me he did some work at the Ministry, and the Ministry of Magic has decided not to pursue the matter of the broken time-turner. However, you need to write a statement explaining how it was broken by Greyback. This statement must be signed by both Atticus and me. After that, he will hand over the statement to the Ministry." "Is it really that simple?" Ron asked, still feeling the sting of Hermione's reprimand for losing so many time-turners. "No hefty fines or months in Azkaban." "Under normal circumstances, yes," Professor McGonagall replied, her gaze sternly fixed on Ron. "But it seems Atticus Blaine managed to, well, let's just say Greyback's attempt to kidnap you in the Forbidden Forest resulted in the time-turner breaking. The Ministry will take these contingencies into account." In truth, the time-turner hadn't been broken by Greyback. It had malfunctioned after a time-trav incident, and Professor Blaine was well aware of this. Ron pursed his lips but remained silent. The Weasley family's financial situation was indeed tight, yet Ron, being a second-generation official, was no stranger to the Ministry's behind-the-scenes dealings. His expression turned uneasy. Since Professor Blaine had taken him to the underground world deep in Nocturne Alley last summer, Ron had realized that the wizarding world was not as idyllic as he had once believed. Like the Muggle world, it was rife with darkness and injustice. The case of Hagrid and Buckbeak was a prime example. Many young wizards had witnessed the incident, and it was clear that Malfoy was at fault. Yet, due to Malfoy's influence, the the Ministry of Magic had ignored the facts and prosecuted Buckbeak. Fortunately, this matter had been resolved. When Hagrid returned to school a few days ago, Madame Pomfrey had sent a message to the trio. The Committee for Handling Dangerous Creatures had decided to drop the case, thanks to Professor Blaine's intervention. Powerful wizards enjoyed certain privileges. This was true for Professor Blaine, Headmaster Dumbledore, and even the influential Malfoy family. That night in the Forbidden Forest, as Harry watched Professor Lupin and the others confront Greyback, he had felt frustrated by his inability to help. Now, seeing how effortlessly Professor Blaine handled one challenging situation after another, a small seed of ambition began to grow within him. With the Time Turner issue resolved, the consequences of the werewolf riot were finally behind them. To avoid any further trouble, Hermione had kicked Harry and Ron out of her ward after Professor McGonagall left. She spent the entire day working on Professor Blaine's statement. It wasn't until bedtime, when Madame Pomfrey needed to perform a final check, that Harry and Ron were allowed back into Hermione's room. The once tidy room was now littered with parchments covered in writing. Hermione's hair was disheveled, and she looked on the verge of collapse. Harry and Ron each picked up a discarded parchment to read. "Your storytelling is far worse than your homework essays, Hermione," Ron chuckled, earning a fierce glare from Hermione. "Ahem, do you need our help, Hermione?" Harry asked, trying to suppress his laughter. "You know, Professor Trelawney's divination class requires a bit of creativity to complete the assignments satisfactorily." Though they had only been in the hospital wing for a week, stepping out felt like emerging from a long absence. The anticipation in their hearts burned like a raging flame. They dashed down the corridor, eager to reunite with their fellow students. By 8:30 on Monday morning, most of the young wizards had gathered in the Great Hall for breakfast. Harry, Ron, and Hermione joined them, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. With a clear purpose, Atticus Blaine hurried down the spiral staircase to the first floor, stepped out of the foyer, and rushed into the Great Hall. As soon as he entered, he sensed that something was amiss. At the faculty dining table, every professor, except for Snape, including Dumbledore, was engrossed in a copy of the Daily Prophet. They were deeply absorbed in the newspaper's words, reading with intense concentration. The scene among the young wizards seated at the 4 long tables below was much the same. They clustered around classmates who had subscribed to the newspaper, pointing animatedly at the articles. What happened? Harry, Ron, and Hermione exchanged bewildered glances as they slowly made their way to their usual seats. As they passed Ginny, Ron asked in surprise, "I thought we were going to be warmly welcomed." Ron's voice snapped Ginny, who was with Colin, back to reality. Upon seeing Harry next to Ron, Ginny's face lit up with a smile, but as she stood, her lips turned pale. "The murderer of your parents, Harry," she said, her voice trembling. Ginny took the newspaper from Colin's hand and handed it to Harry, her lips quivering as she spoke. "Sirius Black has been captured, D by the Ministry of Magic." End of this chapter. Chapter 342, Not Simple Muggles. After Ginny shouted that sentence in a slightly trembling voice, the auditorium fell silent. Harry could feel the eyes of at least 2/3 of the young wizards fixed on him. "Give me some reaction, Harry. You're looking too suspicious," Hermione whispered, gently patting his back. Harry had never found himself in such an awkward situation before. They all knew Sirius was innocent and hadn't surrendered to Voldemort, but to his classmates, Sirius was still seen as a notorious criminal. Rumors suggested he had escaped from Azkaban to seek revenge on Harry, the boy who lived, who had thwarted Voldemort's plans. So, should he appear a bit more cheerful? "Oh, really?" Harry exclaimed, widening his eyes in an attempt to feign surprise and excitement. "When did that happen?" "Ahem, well done. I mean the Ministry of Magic." Ron pinched his thigh hard to stop himself from bursting into laughter, while Hermione's shoulders shook slightly as she struggled to contain her amusement. "The Daily Prophet mentioned it this morning," Neville said, standing a few steps away and waving the newspaper in his hand. "The Ministry of Magic has been interrogating him for a while, trying to figure out how he escaped Azkaban. After all, he was the first to do it." The stares from students across the houses made Harry uncomfortable. He disliked being the center of attention, like an animal in a zoo. He quickly moved towards Seamus and the twins, who made space for him, while Neville buried his head in the newspaper and Hermione and Ron crowded around him. "Did the newspaper say how they caught Sirius?" Ron asked, his mouth full of pie. After a week in the school hospital, his appetite had returned with a vengeance. "It said he was found while they were searching for Greyback in the Forbidden Forest," Neville replied. Harry's focus was on the picture of Sirius in the newspaper. The Ministry had put him back in a prison uniform, but the wounds from that night seemed almost healed. However, to maintain the act, Sirius appeared slightly plumper, with a hint of helplessness on his cheeks. Fred redirected the conversation to Harry. "Black is destined to return to Azkaban, Harry. There's no need to worry about it anymore. Tell us about your duel with the werewolf. Rumor has it that Malfoy got bitten by Greyback. Please, tell us it's true." "Almost," Ron said, trying to swallow his food, his face flushed with excitement. He was about to share Malfoy's misfortune when Hermione kicked him under the table, forcing him to stop. Gryffindor classmates gathered around, and even some Hufflepuffs and Ravenclaws from nearby tables joined in, eager to hear the story. Initially, Ron maintained some moral restraint, crediting Professor Lupin, Snape, and Hagrid for saving them. But within 5 minutes, he was boasting about how he had cut off the ears of a dozen werewolves with a spell. "Can they handle the situation?" Professor McGonagall asked worriedly from the staff table. Connolly's orders were clear: no leaks. But at their age, it's hard to resist showing off. "Oh, what a rare occasion," Snape remarked with a sarcastic smirk. "It's rare that we see eye to eye on Potter and his empty-headed friends." "There's no need to worry, Minerva," Dumbledore said with a smile, his beard twitching slightly. "I trust they can keep it a secret. By the way, should I sign the statement that Atticus Blaine asked Miss Granger to provide?" "If you wish, Albus, I think it would be wise to sign it," Professor McGonagall replied, her voice tinged with irritation as she glanced at Snape, who had been momentarily stunned into silence. At the mention of Atticus, Snape's expression darkened, and after a pause, during which the clinking of knives and forks resumed at the dining table, he asked sullenly, "What is he doing now?" "Pardon me, Severus?" Dumbledore turned his head, blinking playfully. "Who are you inquiring about?" He chuckled at Snape's cold stare. "If you're asking about Atticus, well, I believe he's currently occupied with solving a little problem of his own. I sincerely hope his approach is more tempered. After all, times have changed, haven't they?" As night fell, a bustling market in East London, teeming with restaurants and bars, was alive with muggles. They moved among stalls offering Asian barbecue, Latin American grills, Mediterranean snacks, and classic British dishes. The crowd, dressed in a variety of styles, was largely composed of foreigners drawn by the market's reputation. Little did they know, 2 prominent figures from the wizarding world were nearby. In a quaint tea house with Chinese-style retro decor, Atticus Blaine and Amelia sat across from each other at a wooden table by the window. Atticus took a sip of the bitter tea, setting the rare purple clay teacup down on the table. The dim light cast a soft glow on his face, highlighting his gentle, somewhat lazy smile. "It's surprising, Amelia," he remarked, tapping the table with his fingers and gesturing to the dimly lit scene outside. "As a senior official of the Ministry of Magic, you know more about the Muggle world than I expected." "In Muggle government records, I'm just a single middle-aged woman living alone," Amelia replied. Off-duty, she had shed her intimidating attire for a light green t-shirt and plain jeans, blending in as an ordinary Muggle woman. Watching the Muggle youths pass by the window, she appeared a bit wistful. "You grew up in the Muggle world, Atticus. What do you think of them?" "Remarkable," Atticus said softly after a moment of silence, gazing out the window. "Indeed," Amelia sighed, her tone as bitter as the tea. "Not just in London, but across Europe, America, and Asia. During my tenure with the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, I've visited and exchanged with other countries' ministries of magic. The situation is much the same. Muggle society is evolving rapidly, and their technology has transformed their lives in ways we can't even imagine. They've achieved feats that even wizards find incredible. They can communicate across oceans, wield weapons capable of destroying nations, and travel to the moon. Meanwhile, our wizarding society has remained largely unchanged for centuries. Many wizards born into the Muggle world are quickly influenced by the rigid traditions of our world upon entering it. They integrate into the wizarding world, but lack the Muggles' enviable drive and expansive vision. Atticus lowered his gaze, staring at the shimmering liquid in his teacup, remaining silent. The magical world needs to change, he thought, or else the dignity and confidence of wizards will eventually crumble under the relentless advance of Muggle technology. He had made his point clear. End of this chapter. Chapter 343, Change. For a long time, Dumbledore had hoped that Hogwarts could welcome more young Muggle-born wizards. He believed that once these young wizards entered the magical world, they could subtly influence the old wizarding traditions and bring about peaceful change. This was his vision. However, as Amelia pointed out, there are deeply ingrained and corrosive elements within the wizarding world. Most Muggle-born children, in their struggle to survive in this world, would inevitably be assimilated by it. Atticus Blaine understood that Dumbledore's vision was destined to fail. He recognized that Dumbledore underestimated the potential of Muggles and the rapid progress of the Muggle world. With his God's perspective, Atticus knew that by the 21st century, as Muggle society fully embraced the information age, the flexibility of magic would be further constrained. It might not even take a century before every aspect of magic was overshadowed by Muggle advancements. The Wizard's Secrecy Act, enforced for 300 years, is a formidable cage, Atticus remarked. Everyone assumes that Muggles are the ones trapped, but in reality, it's the wizards who are confined. Muggle society, with its incredible potential, is unleashed by the very existence of wizards. As Amelia listened intently, Atticus continued, I would stake my life on this. Amelia, there is undoubtedly more than one Muggle government secretly researching technology to develop weapons that can counteract magic. If they succeed, have you ever visited a Muggle zoo? That will be our fate, like animals in a zoo. Amelia closed her eyes, envisioning the scenario Atticus described. A chill ran down her spine, making her shudder. As a visionary leader within the Ministry of Magic, Amelia was not like the mediocre lower-level wizards. She understood that Atticus was not exaggerating. Change is imperative, Amelia said, rubbing her temples warily. It's been attempted before, and it failed. Atticus's straightforward response made Amelia's eyebrows twitch, her expression turning to one of fear. You mean, Voldemort's rhetoric was about restoring the glory of pure-blood families, but anyone who lived through those turbulent 20 years knows that he sought a completely chaotic wizarding world and Muggle society. He wanted dictatorship, not change. The teacup in front of Amelia toppled over, spilling tea and leaves across the wooden table. Pale-faced, Amelia tried to lift the cup, but her trembling hands betrayed her, failing repeatedly. Observing this, a waitress in a Kyongsam approached to clean up, but after a casual glance from the young man opposite the gray-haired lady, she froze in place, as if rooted to the spot. We can handle it ourselves, Atticus's deep magnetic voice assured her, and the startled waitress quickly averted her gaze. You actually, Amelia began, but Atticus tapped lightly on the tabletop, and the spilled tea vanished from the table and the bluestone floor. Regaining her composure, Amelia did not scold Atticus for using magic so openly in front of Muggles. Instead, she patted her chest, staring at him in disbelief. Yet, when she saw the calm demeanor and enigmatic eyes of the young man before her, she couldn't voice her original question. Amelia realized that the exceptionally talented young wizard sitting across from her would leave an indelible mark on the history of magic. He was a wizard as remarkable as Albus Dumbledore, and such a wizard would not be intimidated by a mere, dark figure. Atticus remained unfazed by the profound impact his words had on Amelia. He said the word Voldemort. Noticing that her mood had stabilized a little, Atticus Blaine continued lightly. What I'm referring to is Gellert Grindelwald, who was once called the Dark Lord. He was a wizard with a unique vision. He foresaw that if wizards remained stuck in the glory of the Middle Ages, they would eventually be cornered by Muggles. So he sought to initiate change while Muggles were still powerless to resist. But he failed, Amelia replied after a brief silence. Dumbledore stopped him. Even if Dumbledore hadn't stopped him, he would have failed because he was on the wrong path, Atticus criticized mercilessly. The The so-called hard work is hard to return. Wizards are reluctant to face the rapid development of muggles, not purely because they advocate tradition or due to their arrogant self-esteem, but because change threatens the interests of pure-blood wizard families. For thousands of years, these traditional families have been entrenched in the wizarding world like towering trees. They control every aspect of ordinary wizards' lives, the Ministry of Magic, public opinion, and even Hogwarts. War is inevitable, but not a war against the Muggle world like Grindelwald envisioned. Amelia had brought up this topic to subtly reveal her future goals for governance. She believed that for a young wizard like Atticus, who was powerful in magic and born to Muggles, the idea of change was very appealing. However, she found herself drawn into Atticus's perspective. She listened intently, and when she heard his last unfinished words, a sense of dread washed over her. She understood what Atticus meant. In the current state of the magical world, drastic reforms are doomed to fail unless there is a war, an internal war to purge the pests within the magical community. "It's hard to do, Atticus," Amelia said with difficulty. "No one has such determination, and besides, Albus would certainly prevent it." Atticus stroked the rim of his teacup, a secretive smile playing on his lips. "Yes, it's hard, but not impossible. In the Far East, in that ancient country, there's a saying, if you don't break, you can't build. If you break, you can build." He stared at Amelia, who was absorbing the shocking message. The corners of his mouth turned slightly, his smile cold. No magnificent building can be constructed by mere tinkering. Great civilizations may fall, but they can be reborn from the ashes. At one point, Amelia Bones felt the urge to turn and walk away. Or, at the risk of her own life, she considered drawing her wand to arrest Atticus Blaine. She sat across from him in a trance, as if he were completely unaware of the serious consequences his words could cause if they spread. Atticus could grow into a new generation of Dark Lord, far more terrifying than the wizard whose name must not be mentioned. The head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement was in turmoil, cold sweat trickling from her gray temples and pooling on her shoulders. If the person before her wasn't Atticus Blaine, who had single-handedly defeated Greyback and was hailed by the media as the most powerful wizard of the era under Albus Dumbledore, Amelia might not have felt so anxious. But it was precisely because Atticus was a young wizard with immense power and fame that she was so afraid. She knew very well that if Atticus sought to make a name for himself by starting a civil war in the magical world, he could very well succeed. "Don't worry, Amelia," Atticus said with a slight smile, noticing her profuse sweating and changing expression. I have never considered actively instigating changes in the magical world. As you mentioned, Dumbledore would not support such actions, and the current environment within the magical community would not permit it. However, if the right moment presents itself in the future, I wouldn't hesitate to push the boundaries." End of this chapter. Chapter 344. Little Trouble. The conversation on this topic ended with Amelia falling into a prolonged silence. However, Atticus Blaine's words had planted a seed in her heart, one that might someday break through the surface and begin to grow. The issue concerning Sirius was about to be published, and the Director of Magical Law Enforcement, overwhelmed with responsibilities, invited Atticus for tea in the Muggle world. This meeting was not merely for the sake of friendship or discussing changes. There were other matters at hand. At a press conference a few days prior, Atticus's quick thinking and eloquent responses thwarted Rita Skeeter, a journalist notorious for uncovering scandals to captivate the public. Despite this, Amelia had warned Atticus during a subsequent luncheon that Rita Skeeter was a formidable adversary. If she couldn't extract sensational news from the now popular Atticus, she wouldn't relent. True to Amelia's prediction, just a day before the Ministry of Magic was set to announce the situation with Sirius, Amelia received troubling news. It was 9 o'clock in the evening. In the wizarding world, wizards active at such an hour often had dubious intentions, but in the Muggle world, the vibrant nightlife was just beginning. The sidewalks outside the window were bustling with Muggles, shoulder to shoulder. Among them was a middle-aged wizard in a beige trench coat, clutching a worn briefcase under his arm. His baldness was more pronounced than Mr. Weasley's. He stood across the street, searching aimlessly. When he finally spotted Amelia and Atticus through the glass window, he was taken aback. Ignoring the disgruntled looks from passers-by, he clutched his briefcase tightly and pushed through the crowd, making his way into the tea shop. "Good evening, Miss Burns." After much effort, the middle-aged wizard finally reached the pair, wiping sweat from his brow as he greeted Amelia breathlessly. He then turned his gaze to Atticus, who was smiling on the other side. Before he could sit down, he exclaimed in a low voice, "Oh, what an honor, Mr. Blaine. I didn't expect you to be here." "Allow me to introduce you, Atticus." Amelia, suppressing the unease and anxiety from their previous discussion, pursed her lips. Her dignified demeanor returned, befitting the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, renowned for upholding justice in the magical world. "This is Mr. Barnabas Guffey, editor of the Daily Prophet, and an old friend to many in the ministry, myself included." "I've heard much about you," Atticus said, extending his hand to the flattered Mr. Guffey across the wooden table. After a firm handshake, he continued in a steady voice, "Yes, I had to come, Mr. Guffey. Ms. Burns informed me of the situation. It seems the Daily Prophet plans to publish an accusation about me tomorrow morning?" "Oh, it's just the ramblings of that madwoman, Rita Skeeter," Mr. Guffey exclaimed excitedly. "It's utter nonsense. No one will believe you did it. But it is a bit troublesome. Rita is quite famous, and according to the agency's rules, I can't prevent her articles from being published, especially since some points in the article might indeed stir public opinion. She submitted the manuscript to me early this morning. Rita originally wanted this report in today's evening edition, but I delayed it, claiming the article needed editing. I immediately wrote to Ms. Burns, but I'm afraid, without a suitable reason by tomorrow morning." Amelia frowned. "Barnabas, tomorrow's headlines should focus on the Ministry of Magic's capture of the fugitive Sirius Black. You know this has been troubling Connolly for a long time, and he is eager to inform the public. Efforts to capture Sirius Black will bolster the Ministry of Magic's popularity, which has already been enhanced by Greyback's capture," Ms. Burns stated firmly. Mr. Guffey, the editor-in-chief of the politically charged Daily Prophet, nodded in agreement, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. He understood that implicating Atticus Blaine at this moment would so implicate the Ministry of Magic. Although the Daily Prophet is backed by pure-blood families, it would be unwise to antagonize the Minister of Magic, who represents broader interests. But, I can't do it alone," Mr. Guffey stammered. "Rita's articles are always sensational, if she doesn't relent." Amelia's frown deepened, and an aura of authority surrounded her, filling the air. The guests in the once lively restaurant were now watching intently, whispering among themselves and pointing at the window, speculating whether Amelia Burns, in her uniform, was a high-ranking Muggle official or a member of Parliament. Then, "Mr. Guffey," Atticus Blaine's gentle voice cut through the tension Amelia had created. He leaned back in his chair, exuding calmness, as if Rita Skeeter's article posed no threat to him. "I would appreciate the opportunity to review Ms. Rita Skeeter's article before it's published." "Oh, of course not," Mr. Guffey exclaimed, feeling the pressure from both Ms. Burns and Atticus Blaine. "You are a senior advisor to the Ministry of Magic and a Wizengamot attending wizard. Since you are involved in this article—" He wiped his brow and hastily retrieved a stack of parchment from his briefcase, handing it to Atticus. "It deserves your review." The parchment was filled with flamboyant handwriting, and the headline was striking. "Atticus Blaine, hero who slayed werewolves, or dastardly dark wizard." The article, penned by Rita Skeeter, questioned whether Atticus Blaine, who had defeated Greyback and his followers, was truly the talented and honorable wizard everyone believed him to be, or if he was, in fact, a dangerous dark wizard. While the wizarding public celebrated Greyback's capture, one name was on everyone's lips: Atticus Blaine. Recently, Atticus had emerged in the public eye, quickly acquiring prestigious titles such as Senior Advisor to the Ministry of Magic, Attending Wizard of the Wizengamot, and Honorary Deputy Chairman of the Anti-Dark Arts League. He was also a philanthropist, known for his donations to St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Injuries and the Hogwarts Poor Students Fund. Many considered him the only wizard, after Albus Dumbledore, to be recognized as a great wizard by numerous magical world celebrities. However, The article questioned whether Atticus Blaine was truly a selfless, upright wizard with the courage to fight evil. The Daily Prophet exclusively revealed that during his time at Hogwarts, Atticus had once ventured into the Forbidden Forest at night, violating school rules. On that fateful night, 2 young wizards were severely injured, and nearly 10 others were sent to the school hospital because of Atticus Blaine. Curiously, the incident did not receive widespread attention at the time, leading to speculation that Albus Dumbledore had deliberately covered it up. That night, a terrible fire broke out in the Forbidden Forest, which could not be extinguished, recounted a wizard who had since graduated during an interview. The wizard had been cautioned not to reveal the specifics of the dreadful accident, but after the author's persistent persuasion, he finally divulged the shocking truth. That night, someone used Avada Kedavra, one of the unforgivable curses, which carries a prison sentence for its use. They claimed a dark wizard had infiltrated Hogwarts, yet no evidence was found afterward. As far as the author is aware, the Ministry of Magic did not conduct a thorough investigation into the events of that night. Atticus Blaine, who was responsible for injuring dozens of young wizards, was only imprisoned for a short period. Furthermore, according to Mr. Atticus Blaine himself, he had successfully modified the Fiendfire curse 2 years prior, rendering the once strictly forbidden spell safe and reliable. However, this explanation fails to account for the numerous instances of the unquenchable flame from the horrific accident in the Forbidden Forest at Hogwarts years ago. Additionally, in September of last year, while attempting to capture Sirius Black, who had escaped from Azkaban, several Aurors from the Ministry of Magic's Auror office encountered a dark wizard outside the old Black family residence. During the arrest, one Auror was injured by the Fiendfire curse. Interesting, indeed. 10 minutes later, Atticus, having finished reading the entire text, looked up under Mr. Goof's watchful gaze. In the dim light, he displayed an enigmatic smile. End of this chapter. Chapter 345, The Night Visit. In the dead of night, a sharp, crisp popping sound echoed through the deserted street. Dust floated aimlessly in the air, disturbed by the sudden noise. The cold moonlight cast its glow on the scene, creating a sinister silhouette on the pristine ground. The rusty sign reading, Badley Barberton Village, confirmed to Atticus Blaine that he had arrived at the right place. As he passed by a telephone booth and a bus shelter, a narrow but straight street stretched out before him, leading into the heart of the village. On either side of the street stood rows of identical houses. The desolation of the midnight hour was palpable, with wisps of mist clinging to the rooftops of the single-family homes. The mist shifted and changed shape, casting an eerie atmosphere over the quiet village. The church bell tolled at midnight, startling a few crows perched on the cross atop the roof. With a flurry of wings, the crows took flight, disappearing into the endless night. Overhead, a large cloud seemed to synchronize with the sound of footsteps, gradually obscuring the clear moonlight. As the earth was enveloped in deeper darkness, Atticus Blaine's footsteps came to a halt at the end of the street, in front of a neat building nestled within a garden. Gazing at the unremarkable stone house, a cold smile crept across Atticus's face, hidden behind the swirling vortex of dark magic. Just a few hours earlier, Atticus had been sipping tea with the director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement and the editor-in-chief of the Daily Prophet on one of London's busiest commercial streets. His journey to this obscure village was prompted by a report from Rita Skeeter. Out of goodwill, Amelia had offered to negotiate with Rita Skeeter to delay the publication of the article. Such interventions were routine for the Ministry of Magic. Whenever a report threatened the ministry's authority, senior officials would leverage their influence to prevent its publication, thereby managing public opinion. Atticus trusted Amelia's ability to handle the situation, but he chose to address it himself. Maintaining an air of mystery was crucial for commanding respect. Although they were partners, Atticus needed to demonstrate his capabilities to Burns at the right moment, hence his decision to tackle the issue personally. Judging by their reactions, the others likely assumed he intended to eliminate Rita Skeeter. While silencing her or negotiating before the article's release was a viable option, Atticus found it unnecessary. Rita Skeeter was not worth such drastic measures. His primary goal tonight was to prove to Burns that he could resolve matters effectively. "Ah, as expected of you," Atticus murmured with a smile, standing before the wooden fence gate of the garden. He did not advance further, but admired the small garden filled with drought-resistant rare flowers and the two-story stone building. After a moment of contemplation, he extended his right hand, holding his wand, from beneath his black traveling cloak. With a swift flick of his wrist, a cyan ribbon-like light emerged from the wand's tip, twisting and turning in the air before shooting forward. The ribbon rose with the wind, encircling the house like a giant blue python, its other end still tethered to Atticus's wand. Suddenly, the ground rumbled with the sound of wind and thunder. Around the once ordinary stone house, a sudden brilliance erupted, revealing a massive magic circle that enveloped both the garden and Atticus Blaine himself. The pale light of the circle emitted an ominous black halo, filling the air with an endless, haunting wail. Ghostly figures, reminiscent of specters and dementors, emerged from the dark halos, their mouths gaping with jagged, sharp teeth as they launched a ferocious attack on the intruders. Simultaneously, miniature magic circles appeared on the ground of the small garden, where numerous flowers were planted. Protective spells, long set in place, shot towards Atticus Blaine like a relentless storm. "Ho ho, such a grand well. Come." "How flattering," Atticus mused, unfazed by the magical trap capable of leveling a grand structure like Gringotts. With a casual flick of his wrist, a milky white, indestructible magic shield enveloped him, deflecting the onslaught of spells. Despite the barrage, Atticus stood firm against the radiant magic barrier, hovering in midair like a steadfast rock amidst a pack of wild wolves, unyielding to the tempest. As the lights in the stone house flickered on, Atticus could hear the hurried footsteps and the shattering of lamps. Just as he was about to announce his presence, the deep hues of the house at the other end of the light belt began to fade. The stone house twisted and writhed under the influence of space magic, as if it had come alive. Much like the old Black family home, this historic house possessed a similar defense mechanism. Should a wizard attempt to breach it, the house would slip into an untraceable space turbulence. For most, this would spell failure, but Atticus Blaine was no ordinary wizard. The myriad defensive spells burst into dazzling displays against the protective barrier surrounding him. Though the indestructible shield began to tremble slightly, Atticus held firm, reinforcing his defenses. A blue ribbon extended from the tip of his staff, binding the stone house in place, denying it any chance of escape. "Get out of the fireplace!" A desperate voice bellowed from within. "I don't know who this is, but we can't handle him." "Where are you going, dear?" A broken, weeping female voice echoed, followed by a younger, resolute girl's voice. "I'm not leaving, Dad. I want to stay with you." "Listen to me, Beatrice," the man shouted. "Go to the Hogshead pub in Hogsmeade. The owner is an acquaintance of Dumbledore. Tell him about our attack, and he'll inform Dumbledore. Hurry, Beatrice. Dumbledore promised he'd act if we were in danger." The two women seemed to have surrendered. Through the dark window, Atticus saw the distinctive green flames of flue powder flickering in the living room. They were attempting to escape via the flue network. However, with two resounding explosions, the mother and daughter were hurled back into the living room, crashing against the opposite wall. Their escape plan had failed. With the house sealed off, Atticus had ensured there were no loopholes. Whether it was the flue network, a portkey, or apparition, all forms of space magic were rendered useless by the cyan light band encircling the stone house. Inside, the family, seemingly resigned to their fate, embraced and wept in a final farewell. Atticus Blaine stood resolute, his presence a testament to the power and inevitability of his mission. Atticus Blaine felt a twinge of shamelessness as he approached to ask for help. Initially, it seemed like a harmless joke, but fear soon crept in for reasons he couldn't quite articulate. Ahem! A soft, almost innocent cough pierced through the thunderous roar outside, echoing into the house with uncanny precision. The sound caused the somber expressions of the family within to freeze instantly. The familiar, aged voice that followed made the male head of the household's face contort with anger. "Is it so unwelcome to visit old friends, Kakus?" The question hung in the air, leaving a palpable tension in its wake. End of this chapter. Chapter 346. The strong wind high above swept away the dense clouds, allowing the moonlight to cascade down like waves of clear water. The village was shrouded in a gloomy atmosphere. Despite the commotion at Foley's old house, magic concealed any trace of disturbance, maintaining a peaceful facade. The Muggles residing in the small village continued to sleep soundly, unaware of the events unfolding around them. Cacus had carefully arranged for his wife and daughter to stay in a room on the second floor, sternly instructing them not to leave even for a moment. With urgency, he descended the stone steps by the wall. As the disguise was lifted, Atticus Blaine surveyed the family's old house, a myriad of emotions playing across his face, culminating in a bitter smile. "Mr. Blaine." Foley entered the dining room, retrieving a bottle of whiskey and 2 crystal glasses from the cabinet that separated the dining room from the living room. The rich, blood-like liquid swirled in the glass as Cacus pushed it towards Atticus, exhaling a sigh of relief. "You didn't have to, did you?" Cacus remarked with a wry smile, barely concealing the anger in his voice. "Just wanted to share a joke with an old friend, Cacus. You're a bit too tense," Atticus replied, seemingly oblivious to the fact that his actions had been a genuine intrusion. He swirled the glass, observing the sediment in the dim but steady candlelight, then took a sip, narrowing his eyes in satisfaction. "You can't imagine the terror we felt in those few moments. I thought it was the end," Cacus admitted, running a hand through his sweat-dampened blonde hair. His eyes still twitched involuntarily from the fear of having spent the day in the most sinister place in the magical world. "All right, let's pretend it was just a joke. Now, Mr. Gin Viper, what brings you here at this late hour? I doubt it's to accept a task from me, given your current fame and power. If you wished, countless people would be eager to fill your pockets with golden galleons." "It seems you don't know me well enough, Cacus," Atticus replied with a smile. "Gold brought to my doorstep holds little value. I prefer to earn my rewards through effort." Cacus, who had been sleeping soundly before being jolted awake by Atticus's antics, was in no mood for idle chatter. He merely shook his head at the so-called joke, choosing not to respond. "Well, I apologize for disturbing your rest, Cacus. There are indeed 2 matters I need to discuss," Atticus said, his demeanor turning serious. "It's been about 6 months since I placed a commission with you, Cacus. Is there still no valuable news?" Last August, before the summer vacation ended, Atticus had entrusted Foley with a task, hoping that bounty wizards worldwide could help him gather information on the Druids. He knew that the Druids, expelled by the Vatican, were adept at concealing themselves. However, the lack of news after half a year was indeed peculiar. Cacus frowned. "It's truly unusual, Mr. Blaine. The wizards who took on this commission are confident and well-connected. With their skills, they should have uncovered something by now unless... Atticus tilted his head, his expression unreadable. Cacus studied Atticus carefully before continuing. "Unless the Druids have ceased their movements, hiding in a forest somewhere, avoiding any outside activity, they might have done something to anger the Holy See." Atticus understood the implication in Cacus's words, but it was indeed a perplexing situation. It was a reasonable inference. Vitia Creona was no fool. She must have realized that her actions had severely offended Atticus Blaine, and she likely anticipated that he wouldn't let it slide. Therefore, it made sense for her to keep a low profile and avoid drawing attention. Atticus nodded slightly, understanding that this situation couldn't be rushed, and thus he didn't press Cacus further. "There is one more thing that needs to be resolved tonight, Cacus," Atticus said. With a flick of his wrist, a stack of folded parchments appeared in his palm. It was the Rita Skeeter report he had copied from Barnabas Guffey. "Take a look at this, Cacus." Atticus tossed the parchments to Cacus, and then settled back, savoring the whiskey Cacus had offered him. Cacus, not daring to delay, unfolded the parchment. As the title came into view, he raised an eyebrow in surprise, glanced at Atticus with a calm demeanor, and quickly skimmed through the document. "A report by Rita Skeeter, I see. She's quite the celebrity and well-respected in the agency." After a minute, Cacus finished reading the report. He didn't appear overly surprised. To someone like Cacus, who was privy to many secrets of the magical world's elite, this wasn't groundbreaking news. After a moment of contemplation, Cacus tentatively asked, "Do you need my help to report this?" Not help, Cacus, Atticus interrupted, setting down his glass. I understand that the Foley family is one of the shareholders behind the Daily Prophet. I need you, as a director, to prevent this article from being published. It's not a favor. It's an entrustment, and I can offer compensation. The Foley family, one of the 28 pure-blood families, still held some influence despite their waning reputation and power. I can indeed influence the newspaper's affairs, Mr. Blaine. However, the Foley family doesn't hold many shares. The Greengrass family and the Birds are more involved. I'll see what I can do, Cacus decided after a moment's thought. For someone like Atticus Blaine, a wizard with significant influence both in the underground and the public world, the chance to earn his favor was rare. Seizing this opportunity could strengthen their friendship, potentially safeguarding the Foley family in the future. Cacus, known for his strong execution skills, understood that Rita's report was scheduled for publication the next day. Despite the late hour, he used the Flu Network to visit the Daily Prophet and speak with the two major directors behind the scenes. Within half an hour, he returned with a note signed by the heads of the two pure-blood families. Cacus also added his recommendation on a sticky note. Initially planning to send the board's order to the newspaper office by owl, he reconsidered, knowing the paper was already being printed, and made another trip. By the time the moon set in the west, the matter was finally resolved. Atticus observed all of this, understanding that Cacus wouldn't go to such lengths for mere gold galleons. When the family faced danger, Atticus could be of assistance. "All right," Atticus said, having consumed half a bottle of whiskey alone. He rubbed his stomach, stood up, and nodded gratefully to the exhausted Cacus. "I'll remember this, Cacus." "It has been an honor to serve you, Mr. Blaine," Cacus replied with a sincere smile. Atticus knew he wasn't the most considerate guest, having arrived in the middle of the night. Cacus's wife and daughter were still upstairs, unable to sleep. With the matter settled, Atticus prepared to take his leave. "Please wait." Atticus Blaine had just stepped out of the room when Cacus hurriedly caught up with him at the door. Under Atticus's questioning gaze, Cacus clutched his familiar notebook, the one he used for recording commission tasks. With a somewhat bashful smile, he asked, "So, Mr. Gin Viper, do you have any plans to accept new commissions soon?" End of this chapter. Chapter 347, Coincidence. Accept the entrusted task? Atticus Blaine was momentarily taken aback by the question, then suddenly remembered. For over half a year, he had been living a quiet life at Hogwarts, almost forgetting about his serious work. However, after regaining his composure, Atticus didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked expectantly at Cacus, a thoughtful glint in his eyes. Cacus probably didn't realize that Atticus was currently entangled in numerous matters. Even if Cacus wanted to earn a commission from him, this was not the best time. It seemed Cacus must have encountered a particularly challenging commission. Cacus Foley wasn't the only active quest broker in the underground world. There was competition in this industry. For an excellent broker, the most crucial resource was not just quest opportunities, but also access to skilled bounty wizards. Without them, even if a client posted a quest, it would be impossible to find a capable bounty wizard to complete it. Over time, this would undoubtedly affect one's reputation and influence. "Is there trouble?" Atticus inquired. "It's indeed a nuisance, Mr. Goldviper," Cacus replied, understanding the distinction between favors and business. He sighed and continued, "Thanatos Hodder, surely you haven't forgotten him?" Atticus's eyes narrowed immediately, a hint of surprise and caution in his voice. "Thanatos? Has he issued a commission through you?" "That's correct, Mr. Goldviper. It's quite a troublesome task," Cacus admitted, rubbing his temples in frustration. "You surely remember the mission to transport cultural relics back from Egypt. When you returned to England and went ashore, you had a fierce confrontation with the Aurors led by Scrimger. During that battle, Thanatos' bone dragon was destroyed by Scrimger. You know, Mr. Goldviper, Thanatos belongs to the faction of ancient occult wizards who command undead creatures. Losing that bone dragon significantly impacted his strength. Not long after that mission, Thanatos placed a commission with me, hoping someone could find a way to acquire the skeleton of a fire dragon. But that's no easy task, right?" Wildfire dragons are extremely dangerous and are protected magical creatures under the strict supervision of the Ministry of Magic in various countries. Even if a dragon's body decomposes, there are stringent processes in place. Commercially bred fire dragons are too weak to meet Thanatos' requirements. Over the past few months, bounty wizards have been active in various wildfire dragon protection areas, but they've all returned empty-handed. Kakus glanced at Atticus surreptitiously. Mr. Goldviper, I vaguely recall that 2 years ago you obtained a dragon egg of a Norwegian ridgeback from the Norwegian Fire Dragon Nature Reserve and slaughtered a Norwegian red-scaled dragon. What happened to that red-scaled dragon? The valuable materials were dismantled by me, and the skeleton, I left it in the protected area, Atticus admitted, pursing his lips. At the time, he hadn't realized the market value of such skeletons. Otherwise, he would have profited handsomely. What a pity, Kakus sighed, regret etched on his face. So, are you willing to take on this task? How much is he willing to pay? Atticus asked with interest. 6,000 galleons, Kakus quickly replied, sensing Atticus's interest. If you can provide a skeleton of a recently deceased fire dragon, he's willing to pay that price. Of course, we all know the value of a wild fire dragon far exceeds this, so Thanatos is willing to offer some of his valuable collections or magic as part of the remuneration. If it's the skeleton of a fire dragon that has been dead for a while, the remuneration will. Atticus Blaine nodded slightly, acknowledging that the price was still fair. To be honest, Atticus hadn't expected Kakus to propose such a task. If it had been any other assignment, he might not have been able to assist. After all, times have changed. Atticus is now ashore, and getting too deeply involved with the underworld, as he did in the past, always carries risks. His mana, which had experienced rapid growth over the years, had now stabilized, and facing lesser wizards no longer offered him any challenge or improvement. With the completion of the dormitory building, the orphanage required less financial support from him, eliminating the need to take on commissions for gold. This mission also involved Thanatos, which was a surprising coincidence, as Atticus happened to need his help with something. All right, Kakus, I will accept this commission, Atticus agreed. Kakus was overjoyed by Atticus's straightforward acceptance, knowing that with the help of the Golden Viper, his reputation would be preserved. Thanatos is over there, Kakus began, but Atticus interrupted. Don't worry, Kakus, I will communicate with him directly. With a wave of his hand, Atticus left the small village, which seemed untouched by the outside world. Direct communication, Kakus muttered, leaning against the doorframe and frowning as he repeated Atticus Blaine's last words. In the underground world, it was customary for the client and the task acceptor not to meet directly, with any questions about the task being resolved through a broker. Atticus Blaine, a veteran of the underground world, was breaking the rules with ease. Meanwhile, the news of Sirius Black's rearrest by the Ministry of Magic spread like wildfire, causing a stir in the magical community. The uproar from the annihilation of Greyback and his followers had not yet settled when this new development hit. Journalists from around the world who had previously visited the UK to interview Atticus Blaine returned to their countries only to receive urgent notices, prompting them to rush back to the UK, eager not to miss the latest news event. For several days, the entrance to the Ministry of Magic was teeming with reporters, all desperate to find any British Ministry of Magic official who might provide valuable information. However, apart from the official statement published in the Daily Prophet, the Ministry of Magic remained tight-lipped, refusing to make any official comments or allow interviews with Black. Speculation ran rampant, with people wondering if the ministry had concocted a shocking lie to explain Sirius Black's capture. Despite the rumors, Cornelius Fudge stood firm, publicly stating that Black was undergoing interrogation by the ministry and that the truth would be revealed once everything was clear. Such vague statements did little to satisfy the insatiable curiosity of the journalists, who were relentless in their pursuit of the story. Reporters camped outside the homes of every senior official in the Ministry of Magic, hoping for a scoop. As the situation involved internal conflicts within the ministry, Atticus chose not to intervene. Instead, he remained in a London hotel, waiting for the situation to develop and for Peter Pettigrew to make his public appearance. In the meantime, he dealt with letters from fans around the world. One sunny morning, after having breakfast, Atticus returned to his hotel room. Just as he was about to respond to a letter from the Magical Congress of America, requesting him to share his experience inefficiently, Atticus Blaine was deep in thought, contemplating his next move in the relentless pursuit of werewolves and vampires. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a sharp knock on the door. End of this chapter. Chapter 348, Rita Skeeter. Through the closed door, Atticus Blaine already knew who was knocking. To be honest, Atticus admired some of the traits of this female reporter. Despite the events of the press conference, Rita Skeeter had managed to uncover details of the attack by a dark wizard that he experienced as a student at Hogwarts. Her ability to track down those involved in the incident just to extract thrilling stories was commendable. Particularly impressive was her use of fiendfire as a lead to connect him with the dark wizard who had shocked both the Muggle government and the wizarding world in front of Grimmauld Square last year. Her keen and perceptive mind was indeed rare. Boom, boom, boom. Another urgent knock echoed through the room. Rita Skeeter seemed certain that someone was inside, determined not to leave until the door was answered. Atticus raised an eyebrow, pondered for a moment, then slowly rose and approached the door, opening it. Rita Skeeter stood there, dressed similarly to her appearance at the last press conference, though she had swapped her attire for a brightly colored shirt. In her left hand she clutched her distinctive crocodile leather handbag, her fist poised in the air as if ready to knock again. Atticus could surmise that Rita had likely discovered his suppression of the report through the Daily Prophet's board of directors. Her expression was still tinged with anger, but upon realizing the door had opened, she quickly shifted to a more cheerful demeanor. "Ah, Atticus Blaine, finding your residence was quite the challenge for a seasoned Times reporter," she exclaimed. "And as a rising star, I doubt you remember me." "In fact, you do leave an impression, Miss Rita Skeeter," Atticus replied. Rita's height barely reached his chin, and he looked down at this uninvited guest. Despite a certain admiration for her tenacity, he frowned slightly, trying to convey the demeanor of someone who did not wish to be disturbed. "But I'm truly puzzled, Miss Skeeter. How did you discover my room? As far as I know, very few people are aware of my residence here." "Oh, that's just a minor detail," Rita Skeeter responded, acting as if she were an old friend. She unabashedly craned her neck, her eyes darting past Atticus to survey the room. When she noticed a thick pile of letters awaiting replies at the foot of the desk, her eyes gleamed with interest. "Are you replying to fans?" "Oh, it's silly to stand outside and chat. Why don't we go inside and talk?" Without waiting for Atticus's response, she squeezed past him and made a beeline for the desk piled with letters, seemingly intent on peeking at their contents before he could react. However, her attempt was thwarted. Before she reached the center of the room, the letters on the table suddenly leaped into the air, folded themselves into neat squares, and slid into an open box nearby. Simultaneously, the desk drawer snapped open, swiftly gathering all the letters inside before closing with a decisive clang, effectively blocking Rita Skeeter's prying eyes. "I don't recall inviting you into my room, Miss Rita Skeeter," Atticus said, lowering his wand with a stern expression. "Whether by Muggle law or wizard law, that your actions just now could warrant me subduing you and sending you to the Ministry of Magic for a time." "Don't be so cynical, Atticus," Rita Skeeter interrupted with an exaggerated grin. She glanced around the room, quickly taking in her surroundings. Atticus Blaine's gaze was fixed on the glass tea table and the two wicker chairs on the open-air balcony behind the curtains. After tossing his leather handbag onto the coffee table, he ran his fingers through his golden curls a few times. "Why are you still standing at the door, Atticus? We're about to conduct a high-profile interview." Rita Skeeter's lips curled into a smile, her 3 gold teeth gleaming in the sunlight. "You're amusing, Miss Skeeter," Atticus replied, his eyes half closed and a low chuckle escaping his lips. He didn't make any move to dismiss her. Closing the door behind him, he paced toward the balcony. By the time Atticus sat down, Rita had already pulled out her shorthand quill and a fresh piece of parchment from her bag. "Atticus, I use a shorthand quill to take notes. You won't object, will you? This way I can free up my hands and have a normal conversation with you, she said. Atticus gestured that he didn't mind, maintaining a pleasant smile, though his eyes remained devoid of warmth. I don't care how you found out about my residence, Mrs. Skeeter. As a well-known professional reporter, I'm sure you have your ways. But I'm curious, why waste time on me? I'm out of date, aren't I? The talk of the day is Sirius Black, and your colleagues are busy trying to get the inside story of Black's arrest from the Ministry of Magic. Rita raised a heavily penciled eyebrow. Don't underestimate yourself, Atticus. People are still very interested in you. As for Sirius, he's the one who's truly out of date. Atticus pursed his lips, saying nothing, as he noticed the green shorthand quill darting across the parchment spread on the glass coffee table. It wrote, "At the beginning of this conversation, achieved after many difficulties, Atticus Blaine attempted to steer the topic toward the arrest of Sirius, which is currently popular." His young and handsome face remained calm, but the flash of light in his peculiar purple eyes suggested he feared something. Perhaps the author would mention the article that should have been exposed long ago, revealing some horrific truths, but ultimately disappeared quietly from the reports. "Whoa, that's interesting," Atticus remarked, meeting Rita Skeeter for the second time with such emotion. "You went through all this trouble to see me just to fight for your own justice, Miss Skeeter?" The report that revealed the truth. Atticus intertwined his fingers, his smile cold. "I'm not here to fix my own troubles, Miss Skeeter, but to prevent you from making a mistake. The crime committed in Grimmauld Place outside London has no factual connection to me. As for what you reported about that night at Hogwarts, not a single sentence in your report is close to the truth, Miss Skeeter. If anything, I'm here to protect my reputation." Rita Skeeter, an experienced reporter with a tough interviewing style, had faced many dignitaries of the Ministry of Magic and famous figures in the magical world. Many big shots had faltered under her sharp questioning, their psychological defenses eventually breached. However, Atticus Blaine seemed unfazed by her extreme reputation. This young wizard exuded an aura as heavy as the deep sea, suppressing her ability to play freely. Priane and Philoa, you must still remember their names, right, Atticus? 2 innocent young wizards were seriously injured by you. That's the truth, isn't it? Rita stared intently into Atticus's eyes, a stiff smile on her broad face. The truth? Atticus was amused. Miss Skeeter, someone like you should understand that truth is always a relative term, and what you and the inhabitants of the magical realm have never truly sought the truth. End of this chapter. Chapter 349. Rita finally realized one crucial thing. The young man sitting across from her, if placed in the Ministry of Magic at his age, might still be stuck in an obscure department, running errands. But Atticus Blaine was not the typical brainless fool she was used to dealing with. He was brilliant, vigilant, and most importantly, he had extraordinary personal connections. Even the Minister of Magic would struggle to retract an article from the Daily Prophet, yet, according to her sources, Atticus Blaine had the influence to have her article pulled from the next issue, even after the newspaper had begun mass printing. I don't understand what you mean, Atticus. Rita raised her heavily penciled eyebrows. Her face was caked with powder, making her expression stiff. Her smile vanished, and her eyes turned cold. Our readers have a right to the truth, Atticus, and it's my job to uncover it. As silence settled between them, Rita's enchanted quill began to scribble rumors once more. When the author inquired about the shocking attack on classmates at Hogwarts years ago, details to be included in the report, Atticus Blaine, renowned for defeating Greyback, vehemently denied involvement. His intense reaction forces us to question the true nature of this hero, cloaked in a halo of valor. Atticus shook his head in disappointment. His intention in inviting the reporter was to have a cordial conversation and perhaps establish some rapport. But he hadn't anticipated Rita Skeeter's relentless determination to spread falsehoods about him. I think it was a mistake to start this conversation, Miss Rita Skeeter. Boom. Under the bright sunlight, the glass coffee table, reflecting the sun's rays, suddenly burst into flames. Rita Skeeter leaped up, trying to save her crocodile leather bracelet and her quill, but the fire was so intense that, in an instant, all her belongings were reduced to ashes. Within moments, the flames subsided, leaving the glass table and a pot of green plants on it untouched. A gentle breeze swept the remaining ashes out of the glass guardrail, where they vanished completely. "How dare you do that, Atticus?" Rita Skeeter, who had interviewed countless renowned wizards, had never encountered someone so audacious. She glared at Atticus with a venomous expression. "Atticus Blaine, you will pay for this. I swear, you will be ruined." "Leave, Rita Skeeter. I have other matters to attend to, so I won't see you out," Atticus said calmly, waving his hand as the living room door opened automatically. If Rita Skeeter understood the underlying dynamics of the magical world's facade of tranquility, she would refrain from acting impulsively. If she remained oblivious, she risked not only her career, but potentially facing a fate as dire as that of another best-selling author. Rita stormed out, slamming the door behind her with a resounding clang. Atticus merely shook his head slightly, rose from his seat, and returned to his desk to resume the correspondence that had been interrupted. Standing outside the door, Rita was livid and breathless. "Damn Atticus Blaine. No one has ever dared to do this before. Huh. Intercept my reports and destroy my belongings." She glared at the door, her mind racing. There must be something shady going on, right? Of course, these big names are always like this. It's not easy to find someone to inquire about. Blaine is very mysterious. No one knows what he's been up to since he left Hogwarts 2 or 3 years ago. "There's something amiss here," Rita Skeeter mused as she approached the door. Before her visit today, she had conducted a thorough investigation into Atticus Blaine, who had recently emerged in the public eye. However, the results were far from satisfactory. The only information she could uncover pertained to Atticus's activities before graduating from Hogwarts. After graduation, until he was hired by the Hogwarts board last year to search for the heir to the Slytherin Chamber of Secrets, Atticus seemed to have vanished from the magical world. No trace of him could be found. Atticus Blaine had neither chosen to work at the Ministry of Magic nor joined any renowned companies in the wizarding world. He had also severed all ties with his former classmates. The only plausible explanation was that Atticus had returned to the Muggle world, completely disconnecting from the wizarding community. But was this truly possible? A powerful wizard choosing to live among Muggles, away from the magical realm, was as unimaginable as a centaur abandoning the forest to seek a livelihood in Diagon Alley. Moreover, how had he forged connections with influential figures? There was only one possibility. Atticus was concealing his identity, secretly working for corrupt pureblood wizard families and politicians who thrived on their misdeeds. A gleam of satisfaction flickered in Rita's eyes as she believed she had uncovered the truth. However, she lacked crucial evidence. Rita was not one of those uninformed journalists. She understood what kind of stories captivated the public. Mere rumors were insufficient. Lies needed a kernel of truth to blur the line between reality and fiction. Rita's eyes sparkled with determination as she glanced at the stack of letters on her desk. "You'll pay the price soon," she thought. Resolute, Rita's expression brightened. She cast a contemptuous look at the door, then turned and strode arrogantly down the corridor, disappearing with a sense of triumph. If a few harsh words were enough to make him tremble and panic, then Atticus Blaine might not have slept peacefully all these years. Rita Skeeter's visit was merely a minor episode, quickly forgotten by him. Perhaps because the letters had been tidied, the desk in the room appeared much neater. Glancing at the clock on the wall, Atticus stretched, took a deep breath, and closed the magical book before him. It was late February, and the midnight breeze weaving through the skyscrapers carried a strong hint of spring. Standing on the balcony, Atticus gazed out at the quiet city, still aglow with lights. The clear moonlight mingled with the urban haze, casting a serene glow. Perhaps due to recent worries, his head had been intermittently throbbing. When the discomfort subsided, it was replaced by a profound fatigue that seeped into his very bones. For a wizard of considerable magical power, this was unusual and might indicate a serious underlying issue. Getting older, Atticus chuckled to himself, then turned back into the room, closed the glass door, and lay down on the bed, closing his eyes to rest. Yet the slight twitch of his eyebrows suggested he was enduring something. The lights in the last room of the hotel building finally dimmed. Outside, perched atop a pine tree in the courtyard, a plump beetle fluttered its wings and took flight, heading towards the house from which it had just emerged. The beetle landed on the glass guardrail, observing the occupant of the room. The room lay still, with only a sliver of light filtering through the gap in the curtain. Outside, the rhythmic hum of a beetle's wings conveyed a sense of joy. The beetle was patient, not rushing to enter the room. Instead, it mimicked the behavior of an ordinary beetle, crawling up and down the glass panel, feigning interest in a dead mosquito stuck to the glass parapet. Inside, there was no unusual movement. After 10 minutes, the beetle's patience waned. It landed on the balcony floor, targeted the gap between the sliding door and the floor, and charged, attempting to squeeze into the room through the narrow opening. Suddenly, there was a deafening boom. A flash of fire erupted, as bright as Christmas fireworks, and the explosion's roar reverberated through more than a dozen nearby rooms. Lights flickered on in the darkened rooms, and people ran about in panic, their screams piercing the night. On the third and fourth floors, shouts echoed, claiming a gas explosion had occurred. Amidst the chaos, the glass door lay completely shattered, and the tempered glass guardrail was in ruins. Rita S., her blonde hair and cheeks scorched black, dangled precariously hundreds of feet in the air, unconscious from inhaling the black smoke. Observing the scene, Atticus Blaine raised his eyebrows and displayed a peculiar smile. End of this chapter. Chapter 350, The Reappearance of Skeletons. Since the Ministry of Magic announced to the wizarding world that Sirius Black had been successfully captured and brought to justice, a frenzy ensued. Reporters from across Europe and even America descended upon the ministry like a tidal wave, eager to uncover the details of Sirius's capture and his notorious escape from Azkaban. The reception hall of the Ministry of Magic was besieged by journalists, all vying to interview any British ministry employee they could find. However, the operation was shrouded in secrecy. Only a select few, including the Aurors guarding Sirius and the directors of the involved departments, were privy to the inside story. Even Mr. Weasley, with his extensive network of friends across various departments, was baffled by how the typically bureaucratic British Ministry of Magic had suddenly become so efficient. The situation escalated further after a shocking announcement by Mr. Barty Crouch, the director of the Department of International Magical Cooperation. The news sent shockwaves through the already crowded ministry, causing an uproar. Renowned reporters from major newspapers in Europe and the United States abandoned their current stories and rushed to London. Unable to gain entry into the ministry, they clogged the street outside its entrance. This commotion even caught the attention of Muggles, prompting journalists from Muggle newspapers to investigate why so many foreigners in peculiar attire were gathered on an obscure street. Norris DeMann, with his stern demeanor, navigated through the throng of reporters eager to learn more about the infamous Sirius Black. Originally awarded the Merlin Medal of the First Class by the International Federation of Wizards, Norris lost that honor just 3 hours after Barty Crouch's announcement, overshadowed by the sensational return of Peter Pettigrew, who was thought to be dead. "Ah, it's Norris, thanks." The green flames in the fireplace flickered as Mr. Weasley, drenched in sweat, stumbled out, nearly collapsing. Fortunately, Norris, with his tall frame, caught him. "Hello, Arthur," Norris greeted him coolly. "It seems the misuse of magic office has been quite busy these days." "Perhaps," Mr. Ray Weasley replied, too exhausted to complain about the chaos caused by the influx of foreign reporters. He managed a weak smile. "These newcomers aren't quite accustomed to our rules. By the way, are you heading out on business?" "No," Norris replied emotionlessly. "I'm off work." With that, he stepped into the fireplace, disappearing in a burst of roaring flames. "Off work? At 10:30 in the morning?" Mr. Weasley glanced at his watch, feeling a pang of envy. Why hadn't he considered applying for a position in the Department of Mysteries? In Diagon Alley, Norris DeMann emerged from the public fireplace, brushing the dust from his robes. He scanned his surroundings with vigilance, ensuring he wasn't being followed, before setting off towards a less conspicuous alley near the grand white edifice of Gringotts. His destination was not the bank itself, but a secluded alley to the west, known for its notoriety. As he slipped into Nocturne Alley, the sky above darkened, and the air grew heavy with an oppressive atmosphere. Yet for Norris, it was a relief, like a dog finding shade after hours in the sun. Once he was certain no one was observing him, Norris deftly turned his wrist, and a black traveling cloak appeared draped over his forearm. Atticus Blaine donned the cloak and mask, and Norris heaved a sigh of relief. The indifferent expression hidden beneath the mask transformed into one of contentment. The environment, crafted by modern wizards, was far from comfortable for him. In contrast, the grimy and perilous underground world brought him a sense of physical and mental satisfaction. If it weren't for his mentor's insistence that he assume the role of the reticent and the conveniences provided by working in the Ministry of Magic's Department of Mysteries, he would have no dealings with wizards who had forsaken honor. The undead, our ground world, unchanged for centuries, remained constant during his brief absence. Everything here was as it always had been, chaotic yet orderly. Beyond the small wall of the consignment market, two individuals were engaged in a heated brawl. A gust of wind extinguished a cluster of torches suspended in midair. With a quick glance, Atticus noticed Cacus Foley hiding behind a tall task card, a helpless expression on his face. After a moment's thought, Atticus decided against approaching Cacus for an explanation. Instead, he turned to the right, ascending the stone steps carved into the wall, leading to a raised platform embedded in the rock face in front of a rugged fireplace. The fireplaces in the underground world differed from those above ground. They functioned more like portkeys, with exits magically set in various locations. Atticus retrieved a note from his pocket, detailing the fireplace number he should use and the exit's location. Cacus had sent this note via owl. On the other side of the fireplace, the wizard he was to meet awaited him. These fireplaces were typically reserved for emergency transfers, rarely used for trade. However, Atticus was not surprised. The item he intended to trade was both sensitive and substantial, and its sudden appearance in the underground world might attract the attention of stationed aurors. A smirk crossed Atticus's lips at the thought of the aurors. Rufus Scrimgeour's public humiliation at a recent press conference still lingered in his mind. Despite being the head of the Auror office, Scrimgeour had failed to make any significant contributions to the recent series of incidents. The gloom on his face had yet to dissipate. After adjusting a series of characters on the fireplace's lintel, a peculiar dark green flame erupted from the dark hearth. Atticus took a deep breath, stowed away the wand he had purchased from Ollivander's, and drew out a cane topped with a clear crystal ball. The situation on the other side of the fireplace was uncertain, and he needed to remain vigilant. With a whoosh, a torrent of fierce flames surged from beneath his feet, and countless fleeting shadows danced before Atticus's eyes. In a moment, the scene before him solidified. Atticus found himself amidst towering mountains, surrounded by verdant hills. He stood in the center of a clear lake, reflecting low-hanging clouds on a small yellow rock island with a radius of only 100 feet. Where was this? The thought flitted through Atticus's mind. The scene seemed familiar, yet he couldn't immediately recall where he had seen it before. Just then, a loud bang echoed from a few hills away. The sound helped him pinpoint his location. The clouds and steam expelled by the Hogwarts Express locomotive quickly dissipated in the howling mountain wind, but the heavy rumble of the train rolling over the tracks reverberated through the mountains. Here, not far from Hogwarts, Atticus murmured softly, his eyes narrowing with intensity. It wasn't a trap. It was that troublesome old man, Albus Dumbledore, staying at Hogwarts. Who in their right mind would choose to make a trade here? As Atticus Blaine hesitated, contemplating whether to flee, the ground and lake before him suddenly trembled violently, as if struck by an earthquake. A magical force, as deep and unfathomable as an abyss, surged from the bottomless lake, casting the bright world into darkness. Above, the once white clouds, seemingly perched atop the mountains, darkened as if a vast pot of ink had been spilled across the sky. Within the thick, leaden clouds, ominous flashes of lightning flickered. Suddenly, a blinding thunderbolt struck the churning lake, as if heralding what was to come. In quick succession, dozens more thunderbolts crashed down, filling the vast lake with a web of lightning that danced across the surface. The sight before him caused Atticus Blaine's complexion to change. and he gasped in shock. He was so stunned that he forgot to apparate and escape. At that moment, a massive vortex appeared before him, and Atticus realized had a colossal creature lay hidden within the lake, now preparing to reveal itself. What could possibly cause such terrifying changes in nature and the heavens? Fear gripped Atticus's heart as he stared at the gradually emerging shadow, yet a flicker of anticipation sparked in his eyes. With a resounding snap, a gigantic skeleton, towering 60 feet high and as mighty as a god, emerged into the world. In a trance, Atticus Blaine's mouth fell open, and he could no longer maintain his stance. He collapsed to his knees with a thud. End of this chapter. Chapter 351, trading under the ominous dark clouds and above the inky black waters, a colossal skeleton, reminiscent of an ancient titan, loomed over the lake. Each of its thick, gleaming bones was entwined with crackling lightning. In the vast eye sockets of the skull, two dark green flames blazed fiercely, exuding an evil undead power that made Norris Deman, an expert in such matters, tremble with excitement. Every cell in his body seemed to ignite with fervor. In ancient times, the magical environment on Earth underwent a drastic transformation for inexplicable reasons. Populations of powerful creatures, once capable of challenging wizards and ruling the Earth, vanished one by one, their histories erased. The necromancers, who once held great renown within the secret witch genre, found themselves nearly extinct due to the scarcity of sufficiently powerful undead creatures. Consider this: the few remaining necromancers have been reduced to scavenging for the bones of weak creatures like fire dragons. If this trend continues, the extinction of secret witches is almost inevitable. Norris Deman never imagined that in his lifetime he would encounter such a formidable skeleton of a titan purified by malevolent magic. It looks like, as Norris lay prostrate on the ground, thanking the gods for this blessing, an old, hoarse voice tinged with amusement suddenly echoed from above. "You seem to like my little pet, Thanatos." Startled by the unexpected voice, Norris quickly regained his composure, leaping to his feet and scanning his surroundings. His gaze finally settled on the source of the voice atop the massive skeleton. Golden Viper? Recognizing the familiar magical aura and the distinctive mark on the figure's collar, Norris was taken aback. "You didn't. Oh, you haven't shown your face for a while. Everyone thought you were. Well, long time no see, Golden Viper." "There are many who wish for my demise, but none who can achieve it," Golden Viper replied with a cold smile, slowly descending from the top of the skeleton to stand before Norris. The two had collaborated before and knew each other well. Seeing it was Golden Viper, Norris relaxed, dismissing any fears of a trap. Although Golden Viper was ruthless, he generally adhered to the rules unless provoked. "Clearly, not many in the underground world dare to trouble you," Norris remarked casually, his attention riveted on the awe-inspiring giant skeleton before him. He gazed longingly at the massive relic that Atticus Blaine had acquired from Avalon Island, practically salivating. "Where did you find this behemoth?" "In a secret place," Golden Viper replied, noticing the gleam in Norris's eyes. He added, "Don't concern yourself with it, Norris. That secret realm has since collapsed. This skeleton caused me some trouble at the time, but seeing its potential value, I brought it out." Observing Norris's eager expression, Golden Viper tilted his head and chuckled. "I heard from Caucus that you're in search of a new envoy of the undead. How about it? Does this meet your needs?" "Absolutely. I'd spend my entire fortune to acquire it," Norris exclaimed impulsively, then quickly realized his mistake in negotiation. After a few awkward coughs, he glanced at Golden Viper with a guilty expression. "I mean, I'd offer my entire fortune if it were intact, but look," Norris pointed to a jagged crack on the skeleton's right leg bone. "That must have happened during your battle with it, right? To subdue such a powerful undead creature, Golden Viper, it's no wonder you seem unfazed." Atticus Blaine was contemplating the audacity of conducting such activities right under Dumbledore's watchful eye. "Cough, cough," he muttered. "I must say, it's flawed, isn't it? And the price should reflect that." "You are in no position to negotiate with me, Thanatos," Atticus Blaine, known as the Golden Viper, stated bluntly. This was destined to be an unequal exchange. The undead giant in Atticus's possession was one of a kind. Even if you scoured the entire world, you wouldn't find another like it. For mystics who delved into the realm of the undead, this skeleton held an irresistible allure. I understand, Thanatos replied, his voice tinged with bitterness. He silently retrieved his storage bag and began to empty its contents. I just hope that, after all, we are friends, aren't we? Golden Viper, friendship is more precious than gold. If it weren't for his current persona as the Golden Viper, Atticus would have been amused by Thanatos's aggrieved demeanor. This man didn't exhibit such a character within the Ministry of Magic. It seemed he was always putting on a facade. Thanatos extracted items from his storage bag related to necromancer heritage. What remained were the gold he had accumulated over the years and some valuable alchemical tools. Is that all? Atticus asked, taking the bag, peering inside, and weighing it a few times with dissatisfaction. To be honest, Thanatos's wealth was considerable, but compared to the precious bones of the Titans, it was almost insignificant. Thanatos was acutely aware of this disparity, and feared that Atticus might change his mind about selling the bones. He dared not argue, instead gritting his teeth and saying, I am willing to do something for you, Golden Viper, whatever it is, as long as you hand over this skeleton to me. A glint appeared in Atticus's eyes as he replied with a mocking tone, You should be aware of the gap in strength between us, Thanatos. You can't help me. Hearing this, Thanatos's tall frame seemed to deflate like a punctured balloon. Atticus was right. Having witnessed Atticus in action, Thanatos knew the disparity in their abilities. Whatever needed doing, Atticus could certainly accomplish it, albeit with some inconvenience. How much do you want, Golden Viper? Name your price. I have friends who can provide me with some support. Thanatos pleaded. Even in the world above, transactions and favors were not to be confused, let alone in the underground world where only profit mattered. Atticus's attitude was expected. It seems you truly desire this Titan skeleton, Atticus remarked, surprising Thanatos with the unexpected question. Was it even worth discussing his desire for this unique undead creature? Well, you mentioned you were willing to do things for me? Atticus rubbed his chin, eyeing the bewildered Thanatos with a subtle gaze. You're in luck, Thanatos. I do have a few tasks that need attention. It's not that I can't handle them myself, but they are rather troublesome. I am eager to assist you, Golden Viper, Thanatos exclaimed, jumping up with enthusiasm. It would be my honor to help you resolve your issues. There are 3 tasks in total, Thanatos. If you agree, the skeleton will be yours. You won't need to borrow money from your friends, Atticus said, watching Thanatos hold his breath. After a moment of contemplation, Atticus's eyes grew dark and inscrutable. The first task is relatively simple, a time turner. You must be familiar with this marvelous little device. It allows wizards to travel back in time, but ordinary time turners only permit short journeys. I need a method or technology to significantly extend the time it can go back. A few months won't suffice. It must allow travel several years into the past. Do you have a way to acquire this technology, Thanatos? End of this chapter. Chapter 352, 3 Things. As soon as Jin Viper finished speaking, the expression behind Thanatos' mask shifted subtly. The mention of a time turner caught his attention, an artifact well known in the magical world, strictly controlled by the Ministry of Magic. Within the Ministry, the Time Hall, where these devices are kept, falls under the jurisdiction of the Department of Mysteries. Was this a mere coincidence or something more deliberate? In the chaotic underworld, only the shrewdest wizards survive, and Thanatos quickly sensed something amiss. Could it be that Jin Viper had uncovered his true identity outside this realm? Facing the enigmatic Jin Viper, Thanatos' eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. Is there a problem? Jin Viper asked, unfazed. Thanatos, who had just pledged everything for the precious Titan skeleton, now hesitated. His voice was muffled. Let's discuss the next 2 matters first, Jin Viper. Very well. Atticus Blaine nodded slightly. The second matter. You must realize how much this skeleton can enhance your power. Once you master it, few in the contemporary magical world will be able to challenge you, Thanatos. I don't want you to use my gift against me or my allies. You must swear never to become my enemy and to join my camp when called upon. You intend to unify the underground world? Thanatos asked, astonished. If that's your goal, I advise you to abandon it, Jin Viper. Those people won't submit to anyone, regardless of power, and besides, you're not from a secret witch school." "I have no desire to rule anyone, Thanatos," Gin Viper replied flatly. "As for my intentions, they are not for you to question." Thanatos remained silent, weighing his options. This request was more troublesome than the first, fraught with uncertainty. If Gin Viper planned to challenge the Ministry of Magic, yet demanded his allegiance, what should he do? Gin Viper ignored Thanatos' internal struggle and continued, "The third matter, I need you to help me eliminate someone." "Eliminate someone?" Thanatos cleared his mind of complex thoughts and asked, puzzled, "Why can't you handle this yourself, unless—" He glanced at the distant silhouette of Hogwarts, shrouded in clouds, and felt a chill. "Who is it? Surely not Albus Dumbledore." "Humph, do you think you could kill Dumbledore?" Gin Viper snorted disdainfully at Thanatos' sneer. After a moment of silence, he whispered a name. Thanatos fell silent. He stared at Gin Viper, wanting to ask more, but his professional discretion kept his curiosity and confusion in check. "3 tasks. If you agree, the skeleton is yours. If not, I'll erase your memory of this meeting." "Decide, Thanatos," Gin Viper said calmly. Each of Gin Viper's requests carried significant risk. Any one of them, if offered on the underground market, would fetch a high price, especially the third. Yet, Thanatos couldn't tear his eyes away from the Titan skeleton standing majestically in the lake. The immense power within its snow-white bones and the trembling undead energy in its eyes captivated him. If he let this opportunity slip, his mentor might rise from the grave to haunt him. He glanced around, contemplative, weighing his options. Atticus Blaine stood admiring the surrounding scenery, while Thanatos gritted his teeth, clearly determined. The rhythmic chugging of the Hogwarts Express echoed in the distance as it crossed the iron bridge, heading towards Hogsmeade Station. Yet, despite the train's passage, Thanatos remained indecisive. "Since you don't want to." Gold Viper's patience had worn thin. A wand emerged from beneath his black cloak. "That's the end of our deal, Thanatos. I need to clear your memory." "Wait, Gold Viper." Thanatos leapt up, gasping for breath. "I didn't say no. I just need some time to assess the risks." "Profit is always proportional to risk, Thanatos," Gold Viper replied impatiently. "If you can't grasp that, I suggest you leave the underground world and set up a stall in Diagon Alley selling cauldrons." Whether Thanatos would choose to trade was a question that required little thought. Since Atticus had sought him out, it was certain he would agree. The red glow of the contract gradually faded into the gloomy air. After agreeing on the handover time for the enhanced magic of the time-turner, Atticus departed with his entourage, leaving Thanatos in the suburbs, grinning foolishly at the towering skeleton. He would likely need to remain in the wild for a few days to familiarize himself with the skeleton's performance. Overall, Atticus was very satisfied with the deal. Not only had his recently inflated pockets grown richer, but he had also resolved 2 difficult issues and made some preparations for the future. In the underground world, at the trading market, Atticus returned to the stall where he had purchased the blood curse. He stared indifferently at the Greek wizard, whose skin was as tough as that of an African tree snake. "Aside from that notebook, did you really find nothing else of value?" Atticus inquired. "Sorry, Mr. Gold Viper," the stall owner replied regretfully, shaking his head. "It's a very old ruin, and there wasn't much of value. That magic notebook was our only find." The stall owner rolled his eyes, leaned in cautiously, and whispered, "Is that really the magic research manuscript of Despicable Hirebow?" Gold Viper cast a cold glance at the stall owner, who clearly had ulterior motives, and left without a word. It had been quite some time since he acquired that stack of manuscripts. From the moment he began studying magic, Atticus had never devoted so much time to the study of spells. However, the blood magic spell was of extraordinary importance, and mastering it was essential. Given his current magical expertise, few could offer him guidance. Was he really expected to consult Dumbledore about this dark and cruel magic, as sinister as Horcruxes? Atticus shook his head. This was his own plan, and he didn't want Dumbledore to become too involved. Lost in thought, Atticus made his way towards the exit of the underground world. Just as he was about to step into a carriage, chaos erupted in the pet market. Atticus glanced over with indifferent eyes and quickly grasped the situation. Some fool from Ouagadougou had brought African witchbirds to sell. These birds were known for their vibrant plumage and high-pitched, maddening song. They often required a silencing spell before being brought to market. It seemed the spell cast by the seller had failed, and now the cacophony of a cage full of witch-birds had startled many nearby magical creatures. A group of unfortunate individuals, their minds addled, had drawn their wands and begun attacking each other. After a few moments of observation, Atticus shook his head and continued on his way. Atticus Blaine shook his head, losing interest. He stepped onto the trolley, turned the control lever, and with a click, the calipers used for braking were released. The trolley began to move forward, gradually picking up speed. Just as it was about to leave the gentle road and start climbing the slope, Atticus frowned. With a sudden crash, he jumped out of the trolley, his attention drawn to the magical creatures in the trading market, their dignity stripped away. He looked at them with a hint of suspicion. End of this chapter. Chapter 353, Low-Level Mistakes. Atticus Blaine stared at the cacophony around him, the cawing of the witchbirds, the clamor of nearby wizards locked in combat, and the distant curses echoing from the magical animal trading market. His purple eyes widened in surprise. Just moments ago, the mental assault from the wicked bird had sparked a revelation in his mind. For nearly 10 months since acquiring the manuscript, Atticus had conducted countless experiments, yet success eluded him. In his quest to uncover the reason for his failures, he meticulously analyzed and reconstructed the curse structure of the blood curse using the remaining information in the manuscript. Despite his efforts, no amount of refinement yielded results. But now, a new possibility dawned on him. Before embarking on his initial experiment, Atticus had invested most of his galleons with Cacus Foley to gather information on druidism. To cut costs, he used weak and ordinary creatures as experimental subjects. Normally, this shouldn't have affected the outcome, but he had overlooked a crucial detail. The essence of the blood curse's power lay in the soul of the creature, and the soul of an ordinary being was too feeble to sustain Atticus's magic. Consequently, at the critical juncture of each experiment, the soul, serving as the curse's seed, would collapse, leading to failure. Although this was mere speculation, Atticus was convinced that this was the root of his setbacks. "What a foolish mistake," he muttered, shaking his head with a rueful smile. In the realm of magical experimentation, even the smallest error could result in complete failure. Those with profound magical knowledge, like Atticus, often attributed their mistakes to complex issues, while overlooking simpler errors that even novice wizards might recognize. This was the blindness of knowledge. Suddenly, a ball of bright red light soared into the air, casting brilliant red beams under the cold gaze of many onlookers. The witchbirds in their cages and the wizards whose minds had been muddled all fell silent, their bodies collapsing to the ground. "What price do you plan to sell these wicked birds for?" Atticus inquired, addressing the Wagadoo wizard, whose totem was painted in vibrant colors. It took a few moments for the dazed wizard to recall the recent events. He sprang up, kicking the cage holding the witchbird with frustration, cursing incessantly until he finally calmed down. "Are you Mr. Golden Viper?" the Wagadoo wizard asked, recognizing Atticus's alias with a glint of interest. In the underground world, reputation was synonymous with wealth. Known for his skill and high task completion rate, Atticus, or the Golden Viper, was a figure of considerable renown and fortune. "One for 500 galleons, Mr. Golden Viper. There are 6 in total. If you buy them all, I'll give you a 10% discount." The Wagadoo wizard quickly added, sensing the cold aura emanating from Atticus. "You can't imagine the effort it took to bring these lively little creatures here. The British Ministry of Magic has banned flying carpets, and I was nearly caught by Border Patrol snipers when I landed. It cost me a fortune to secure my release, so the price—" 1,005, Atticus interrupted, offering a fair price without further ado. "If you don't agree, I'll leave you lying on the ground a bit longer." Thus, the deal was sealed amicably. The materials he needed were finally within reach. The curse seed was ready, and Atticus Blaine needed a suitable host for it. Ideally, this host would be an intelligent magical creature. The house elves, still frightened, had not yet returned to their underground world. In the current magical creature market, aside from centaurs, the only intelligent beings available were Vila and Irish leprechauns. I should have known how many werewolves should be left behind, Atticus muttered under his breath, his eyes darting between the three magical creatures, torn with indecision. Recently, he had forged a friendly relationship with the centaurs in the Forbidden Forest. If possible, he wished to avoid spilling the blood of their kin. Vila seemed the best choice. One of their two forms possessed a soul quality closely resembling that of a wizard. Yet, because of this similarity, Atticus hesitated, ultimately deciding to spare them from their unfortunate fate. The Irish leprechauns, on the other hand, were highly sought after in the underground world due to their innate magic. While the cunning goblins at Gringotts were not easily deceived, and large alchemy workshops and companies had ways to verify the authenticity of galleons, many ordinary people in the magical world lacked such discernment. Unscrupulous individuals could exploit this, and an Irish leprechaun could yield more profit than several medium difficulty tasks. After spending another 2,000 galleons, Atticus finally gathered all the high-quality experimental materials he needed. Now, he required an undisturbed location for his experiments. The hotel where he was staying was unsuitable for magical experiments, especially after the commotion caused by Rita Skeeter a few days prior, which had made him less than welcome there. Torn between the Shrieking Shack and number 12 Grimald Place, Atticus ultimately chose Grimald Place. The old house was protected by numerous enchantments, ensuring privacy and security. At least, it wouldn't be exposed. Boom! After spinning through the gray void filled with spatial turbulence, Atticus landed firmly in the narrow corridor behind the door of the Black Mansion, now Blaine's mansion. Before he could fully grasp his surroundings, a vicious, sharp voice pierced the air. Despicable and shameless thief, vile, dirty mudblood, what? The high-pitched, dizzying curses abruptly stopped at their climax, replaced by a scream of surprise. Mr. Blaine! Creature, with a string of snot bubbles hanging from his fleshy nose, shuffled over with comical steps from in front of Sirius's mother's portrait and stopped before Atticus. Creature has been wondering when he might see you, Mr. Blaine. Is there anything Creature can do for the great Mr. Blaine? Since Atticus, Remus, and Sirius had retrieved Regulus's body from the cave where Voldemort hid his Horcruxes, the house elf, who had once been hostile towards them, had reconciled. Remus believed the house elf was grateful, but Atticus suspected that the display of power in the cave that night had played a crucial role. "Oh, Creature, it's you," Atticus smiled, passing by Creature casually. "Reminiscing with your old master?" "The old master has been in a bad mood recently. Respectfully, Mr. Blaine," Creature replied humbly, trailing behind Atticus. For so many years, the old master hoped that Master Regulus had merely run away, but since you and Master Sirius brought back Master Regulus' body, she has had to face reality and can no longer deceive herself. It was indeed a tragic situation. For the sake of Regulus and Sirius, Atticus decided to overlook the unfinished shouting from the portrait. Atticus Blaine paused for a moment, allowing the painting to hang on the wall for a couple more days. He pushed open the door at the end of the corridor and ascended the stairs, intending to return to his previous room for a brief rest. He wanted to ensure he was in peak condition before commencing the experiment. Creature, his loyal companion, followed closely behind, his eyes darting nervously, as if he had something to ask but was hesitant to speak. Just as Atticus was about to open the door and enter the room, he stopped abruptly. Looking down at Creature with a gentle smile, he said, "Oh yes, I almost forgot. Creature, I have 2 pieces of good news to share with you." End of this chapter. Chapter 354, Cruel Magic. "Sirius will be free soon," Atticus Blaine remarked with a smile. "You've been cooped up in this room all day, so you might not be aware of what's happening outside. The Ministry of Magic has revealed the truth in the Daily Prophet. In a few days, the Wizengamot will likely begin the investigation into the wave of killings. The trial of Peter Pettigrew, the true culprit behind the Tet's deaths, is imminent. I should be there, and after that, Sirius will probably return." "Creature is happy for Master Sirius," Creature responded, blinking his bloodshot eyes. He bravely lifted his head and asked, "When Master Sirius comes home, will there be a funeral for Master Regulus?" Both born of the same mother and direct descendants of the Black family, the disparity in their treatment was striking. Atticus pursed his lips, but chose not to answer Creature's question. Instead, he reached into his pocket and, after a moment, retrieved the exquisite locket that once belonged to Salazar Slytherin. He presented it to Creature. This time, Creature's reaction was more typical. His eyes, swollen and red, filled with tears instantly. His body trembled violently as he stared at the locket in Atticus's hand with disbelief. Creature can't believe it. Creature extended his trembling fingers, yearning to touch the open locket, but hesitated, lacking the courage. Creature tried so many times, but the powerful black magic on the box stopped Creature. But you did it, Mr. Blaine. Master, you fulfilled Master Regulus's last wish. You are the greatest wizard Creature has ever seen. Atticus's cheeks twitched slightly. This old-fashioned house elf was adept at adapting to circumstances, yet it was clear he genuinely respected Regulus Black. Yes, the magic on this locket has been destroyed, Atticus confirmed. Creature was already on the ground, weeping with joy, continuously chanting. Regulus's last wish had been Creature's obsession. For years he had lived in solitary pain, burdened by a task he could never complete. Now, Atticus had freed him from that torment, and Creature's gratitude was boundless. "All right, Creature," Atticus gently interrupted Creature's rolling with a soft voice. "From now on, you can live a little easier. Please, could you help me make lunch? I'm a bit hungry." "No problem, Master Blaine," Creature exclaimed, leaping up like a carp. He wiped his nose with his hands and eagerly headed downstairs. Serving wizards was a command ingrained in the souls of house elves, and they took pride in it. "Since you can clean up this house, Creature," Atticus called out to Creature, who was already at the stairs, "please clean yourself up before cooking." After enjoying a well-prepared and delicious lunch, Atticus returned to his room to rest, hoping to shake off the fatigue from manipulating the giant skeleton of the Titan earlier that morning. He opened his sleepy eyes and lazily rose from the bed as the sun shifted from golden to red. Glancing at the wall clock, Atticus clicked his tongue in dissatisfaction upon confirming the time. Perhaps his life had become too comfortable lately, as he felt himself growing lazy. Regulus's body was placed in the room he had lived in on the 5th floor, while Atticus's room was on the 4th floor. Out of respect for Regulus, Atticus had moved to a guest room on the 3rd floor, taking care to transfer the furnishings elsewhere. After some renovations, Creature was instructed not to enter the room unless summoned. Mystical creatures possess intelligence beyond that of ordinary animals. The witch-bird that landed on the ground let out a heart-piercing scream, its sharp noise echoing through the air. The sound of fingernails scraping against the blackboard gave Atticus Blaine a splitting headache. An Irish leprechaun, sporting 2 comical chestnut mustaches, hurled curses at Atticus in the most vile language it could muster. If not for the thumb-sized venomous snake coiled around it, the leprechaun might have leapt up to pummel Atticus's knee. Even restrained, it didn't forget to make obscene gestures with its stubby hands. With a calm demeanor, Atticus waved his wand, causing the 2 troublesome creatures to faint simultaneously. The next magical experiment required their souls to remain stable, as excessive emotions could disrupt the process. Atticus had performed this spell numerous times and was well versed in its execution. He levitated the 2 creatures onto the test stand and closed his eyes to center himself. When he reopened them, his purple eyes reflected only cold logic and a thirst for magical mastery. Outside, the world was alive with the vibrancy of spring, the warm breeze intoxicating. Yet, within the old Black family house, it felt as though a harsh winter had settled in. Pure white ice crystals seeped quietly from beneath the laboratory's closed door, spreading rapidly along the 3rd-floor corridor like ivy nourished by abundant rain, covering the walls in an instant. In the unseen realm, a malevolent, ink-black magic roared. Creature, the house elf stationed outside the door, trembled with fear, longing to flee but bound by his nature to remain. Inside the laboratory, a thick fog hung in the air. The granular black mist ebbed and flowed like tides pulled by the moon. Amidst this turbulent black wave, the only object emitting a white glow was the soul Atticus had extracted from the body of the wretched bird. Its luminescence, akin to moonlight, had a gelatinous texture. Separated from its body, the soul's brilliance surpassed that of the ghosts haunting Hogwarts for centuries. Gazing at the soul, Atticus felt an uncontrollable joy welling up within him. Experience assured him that success was within reach. His wand traced a mysterious path through the air, and under the influence of an enigmatic force, the black gravel floating in the room converged at the wand's tip, forming a pattern resembling a talisman or a ray. As this pattern materialized, the potent and sinister magic caused the air to tremble violently, and the soul of the wretched bird rippled like a lake disturbed by a gentle breeze. Atticus narrowed his eyes, pressing his wand against the pattern that embodied malevolent will and immense magic. Slowly and with great effort, he maneuvered it toward the soul of the wretched bird, as if pushing a heavy object. The moment they touched, a horrific scream echoed in the void, and the outline of the wretched bird's soul quivered violently. The fear and despair emanating from it were palpable, even to creature outside the room. Dozens of thin tendrils, like plant roots, extended from the jet-black pattern, piercing fiercely into the soul. As it was consumed, the once pure soul darkened, its halo tainted with hints of malevolence. It was a rare opportunity to glimpse the mysteries of the soul. Atticus set aside all distractions, focusing intently on analyzing the soul's secrets suspended in midair. Drawing upon his existing knowledge, he swiftly constructed a framework for understanding the soul system. The transformation was underway. The wicked bird's soul lingered for 10 minutes. As the pattern fully dissolved its host, an invisible, rippling gust of wind surged toward Atticus Blaine, compelling him to take a step back. However, as quickly as the disturbances arose, they subsided, leaving behind a smoldering black curse seed that materialized before his eyes. End of this chapter. Chapter 355. Like a flower from hell blooming in the world, the flames of Duodong ground spread outward, resembling fiery petals. These ethereal petals, though seemingly illusory, possessed an intense corrosive power. As they touched the table and floor, it was as if countless seasons had passed in an instant. The surfaces darkened, then turned gray, and finally crumbled into dust in the blink of an eye. It worked. Atticus Blaine pursed his lips, nearly leaping with joy. It had been a long time since he felt such happiness, having finally overcome the challenge of developing a new spell. The dim light in the room cast strange shadows on Atticus's handsome face as he quietly admired the flickering flames, his proud work. Suddenly, a strange noise came from outside the door. Atticus turned his attention to the sound, his brows furrowing slightly. It was Creature, the loyal house elf who had been guarding the door. The old creature could no longer withstand the magic escaping from the room and had fainted in the corridor. Atticus snapped back to reality. He had been so focused on the blood curse that he hadn't noticed the adverse effects it was having on his surroundings. Most of the old black house was now covered in a layer of light blue frost. The portraits of the Black family ancestors, hanging on the walls, were frozen in their frames, their eyes expressing silent fury. Meanwhile, the Muggles living in rooms 11 and 13 of Grimmauld Place sensed something amiss. Though the red sunset still painted the sky and the air was clear, their rooms had become unbearably cold. Atticus's frown deepened. He realized it was not the time to revel in his success. The Irish leprechaun, bound nearby, briefly regained consciousness, but fainted again after being bitten by the venomous snake that restrained it. Atticus controlled the soul of the wretched bird, making it hover above the leprechaun's head. Taking a deep breath, he pressed his wand down, igniting the creature in flames. Instantly, agonized screams echoed through the old house, as if the very walls were being torn apart. The Irish leprechaun's cries were sharper than those of Walter downstairs, who had witnessed the desecration of the family mansion. Mrs. Gar Blake was even more distressed. The leprechaun, not much larger than a goblin, was covered in fierce magical lines. These dark, blood-red lines seemed alive, forcing their way into the leprechaun's body, mercilessly consuming its life and soul. This was the most malevolent curse. Even if the leprechaun survived and had offspring, its descendants would remain cursed by Atticus for millennia. The curse's effects were swift. Within just 2 minutes, the leprechaun's body underwent a dramatic transformation. Like soft clay, its features collapsed, fingers elongated into sharp talons, and its feet retracted with a whistling sound. Vibrant feathers sprouted like mushrooms after rain, while bloody wing bones pierced through its back, quickly forming as nerves, blood vessels, and flesh covered them. The leprechaun's anguished cries shifted, losing the ability to curse Atticus. All that remained was a gaze filled with unforgettable hatred. Gah! A distinctive cry echoed, signaling the completion of the transformation. A magical force that seemed to confuse the very soul reverberated through the room, marking the end of a cruel transformation. This was not transfiguration, nor was it the work of a polyjuice potion. It's incredible. It's genius. Atticus Blaine marveled, reflecting on his journey over the past decade. From a novice magic apprentice who knew nothing, he had ascended to a position where he was considered above all witches. Yet, despite his achievements, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. Atticus had managed to restore the blood curse using only experimental records and remnants of the curse's configuration, a feat that showcased his remarkable talent. However, even his accomplishments paled in comparison to those of the legendary ancient Greek wizard, Helpo the Vile, the original inventor of the blow, odd curse, and Horcrux. Even Muggles understand that mismatched blood and organ transplants can be fatal, yet the magic of the blood curse could seamlessly embed a unique soul into another species' soul. For wizards, even those with mana, this was considered unscientific. As Atticus watched the Irish leprechaun scurry around in confusion, completely bewildered by its transformation, he couldn't help but smile. Horcruxes, he knew, involved splitting one's soul through murder and storing the fragments in objects. As long as these fragments remained intact, the original owner's soul could persist. The only way for a split soul to reunite with the main soul was through sincere repentance, a process so excruciating it could be fatal. In contrast, the blood curse could fuse different souls together. Atticus silently retrieved a glass bottle from his pocket, containing a milky white glow, reminiscent of the soul of the wicked bird he had just encountered. As he turned the bottle in his palm, a secretive and unsettling expression crossed his face. Inside the bottle was a fragment of Voldemort's soul, not the locket or Ravenclaw's diadem, but the first Horcrux created by Tom Riddle, hidden within a black notebook. Describing it as a soul fragment seemed inaccurate, for in the Slytherin Chamber of Secrets, Atticus had dismembered the soul within that notebook. What remained in the bottle was the purified essence of the soul, the human emotions and desires Voldemort had rejected. A memory, recovered from Draco's dormitory after an encounter with Harry, had revealed to Atticus that this essence would be the key to Voldemort's downfall. As he emerged from his contemplation and returned the glass bottle to his storage bag, the witch-bird had reverted to its leprechaun form. The Irish leprechaun cowered in a corner, staring at Atticus with a mix of helplessness and terror, its hatred replaced by fear. The blood curse was not a permanent transformation. Initially, it caused sporadic changes without any discernible pattern. Over time, the frequency of these forced transformations increased until the soul could no longer absorb or transform the pure magic in its surroundings. Eventually, all its power would become tainted, and the creature's intelligence would be blinded, turning it into a wild beast forever. If offspring were produced during this process, the blood curse would use the blood bond as a bridge, passing the curse onto the next generation. In Atticus's view, the killing curse, imperious curse, cruciatus curse, and even spells like fiendfire were purely cruel, yet they could not compare to the insidious nature of the blood curse. With a flick of his finger, Atticus sent a red light shooting from his fingertips, stunning the leprechaun. The Irish leprechaun had cost Atticus Blaine 2,000 gold coins. It seemed too extravagant to simply destroy it. The spell required its presence, and there were still crucial experiments that needed the cooperation of this little creature. Atticus had been living a content life in the old black family house for several days. The place was secluded, ensuring that no one would interrupt his dark magical experiments. Creature, the house elf, was loyal and would not divulge any information about him. In fact, the ancient house elf held Atticus in high regard, partly due to the ominous magical aura emanating from the laboratory. As a descendant of a pure-blood wizard family, Atticus was well-versed in the arcane secrets of black magic, secrets that only the eccentric Master Sirius seemed to dismiss. However, Good times are often fleeting. A letter from the Wizengamot, forwarded by Dumbledore, abruptly ended his peaceful holiday life. End of this chapter. Chapter 356. The Wizengamot. After nearly half a month, Atticus Blaine stepped through the gates of the Ministry of Magic once more. The grand entrance hall was teeming with a sea of heads. Dozens of magical newspaper reporters from around the globe, along with notable figures from the wizarding world, had gathered in anticipation of the trial's outcome concerning Pettigrew Peter. Atticus had anticipated this scene and had altered his appearance beforehand to avoid causing a commotion. The Ministry of Magic had placed unprecedented importance on this trial. To maintain order, all departments, except those handling emergencies, had dispatched their employees to the hall. At the spot where Eric Munch usually stood on duty, near the entrance to the elevator hall, the ministry had stationed personnel to set up a cordon, preventing those unrelated to the case from entering. Atticus struggled to push through the throng and spotted Mr. Weasley, whose forehead glistened with sweat. He was crouched behind the cordon, looking anxious, his eyes scanning the bustling crowd as if searching for something. "Mr. Weasley," Atticus called out, waving to catch Arthur Weasley's attention. Upon seeing Atticus's familiar face, Mr. Weasley's expression shifted from confusion to delight. "It's me, Bill's old friend," Atticus said with a smile. "Oh." Mr. Weasley's face lit up with relief, and he visibly relaxed. He signaled to the Auror on duty, pulled Atticus through the cordon, and led him briskly into the elevator lobby. "Dumbledore mentioned you hadn't been involved in such matters before, so he asked me to guide you here." While waiting for the elevator, Mr. Weasley wiped the sweat from his brow and observed Atticus as his features returned to their original state. "Ah, that's a clever disguise, Atticus. Where have you been hiding?" "The Wizengamot Management Office sent you a dozen letters about the trial, but none of the owls could find you. Amelia was so frustrated she almost contacted Dumbledore." Atticus offered an apologetic smile. "I've been staying at 12 Grimmauld Place. You know, that old house has very strict protective measures. I completely forgot about the trial until Dumbledore had Headmaster Black's portrait remind me." "Ah, that's understandable, given it's your first time participating," Mr. Weasley replied with a grin. He handed Atticus a purple robe that had been draped over his arm. "Amelia asked me to give this to you. Put it on quickly, Atticus. All Wizengamot members must wear this during the trial." Mr. Weasley grumbled as he roughly punched the button for the 9th floor. "They've scheduled the trial in the 10th courtroom, and we can't even get an elevator to that floor. It hasn't been used since you-know-who's fall. They even had Perkins clean the room. That's the only help I could offer." "There's no need to worry, Mr. Weasley," Atticus reassured him with a laugh. "The Wizengamot won't be dismissed because of me, and Peter won't escape justice." The elevator groaned as it reached the 9th floor. Unlike other floors, the cold voice announcing the elevator's arrival fell silent after stating, "Department of Mysteries," offering no further introduction. Despite the flamboyant color of the Wizengamot's robes, they exuded an air of majesty when worn. The only flaw was that the ministry had neglected to measure Atticus's height, causing the robe's hem to trail along the ground. Atticus Blaine tipped his hat and quickly followed Mr. Weasley into a corridor. This passageway was markedly different from the one above. As Atticus glanced at the black door, a subtle furrow appeared on his brow. The Department of Mysteries was indeed complex. Even a simple door here could block magical perception. As they walked, Mr. Weasley and Atticus encountered no one. However, when they turned from a gap in the corridor to the stairs leading further underground, the area was bustling with people. Among them was Tonks' senior from the Auror's office, Kingsley, who had crossed paths with Atticus before. "Good morning, Mr. Blaine," Kingsley greeted in a calm voice before Atticus could speak. "Ms. Burns informed me that if you came down, you could go straight in." Kingsley then turned to Mr. Weasley. "I'm sorry, Arthur, but you don't have authorization. You'll have to stop here." Mr. Weasley showed no surprise, as if he had anticipated this. Atticus was aware of Mr. Weasley's connections and subtle influence within the ministry. Guards stood every few steps on the stairs, and Atticus asked in mild astonishment, "Good morning, Kingsley. Is all this really necessary? It's just Peter Pettigrew, and Dumbledore is down there too. He can't just fly away. It might not seem significant to you, given your ability to take down so many werewolves on your own, Kingsley replied, leading Atticus further down after bidding farewell to Mr. Weasley. With a complex expression, Kingsley continued, but we can't ignore that the Wizengamot is about to try the most evil and cunning dark wizard we've encountered in 12 years. He's brought disgrace to the Ministry. As Kingsley spoke, every Auror standing guard wore a tense expression, and a chill permeated the air. Aurors were among the most esteemed professions in the magical world. Yet despite Atticus Blaine's recent rise to fame, none of the Aurors approached him. They adhered strictly to protocol, remaining vigilant against any potential trouble. Kingsley and Atticus descended the stairs and proceeded along another crowded corridor. The architecture here mirrored the underground corridors leading to the Slytherin common room at Hogwarts, with rough stone walls and torches in brackets. The doors they passed were heavy wooden ones with iron latches and keyholes. In front of a foreboding black door with a large iron lock, Kingsley halted and nodded at Atticus. "This is it, Mr. Blaine. I can't go in without explicit instructions." "Thank you," Atticus replied with a smile, walking past Kingsley. As his hand touched the cold doorknob, he suddenly remembered something and turned back to stop Kingsley, who was already walking away. "Oh, by the way, Kingsley, I might need a favor. If possible, could you help Tonks get a few more days off?" Seeing Kingsley's puzzled expression, Atticus's lips curled into a grin. She's been preoccupied with solving her single status lately. Atticus then turned his attention to the courtroom before him. The surrounding walls were made of black stone, and the torchlight was dim and somber. On either side of the aisle were rows of empty benches that rose gradually, and in front of him, on the highest benches, shadowy figures loomed. They had been whispering, but as the heavy door closed behind Atticus, a cold emptiness enveloped the room. "Atticus!" Several voices called out in greeting, including those of Amelia Bones, Cornelius Fudge, and Dumbledore, along with other prominent figures he had recently encountered in politics and business. As he entered, the whispers grew louder, and many wizards pointed at him, discussing his presence, to the acquaintances around him. As he glanced around, most of the wizards who met his gaze offered friendly smiles, while a few remained indifferent, seemingly unaffected by his presence. Standing behind the podium at the center, Dumbledore, the chief wizard of the Wizengamot, greeted him with a gentle smile. "Take a seat, Atticus," he said warmly. End of this chapter. Chapter 357, Judgment Behind Dumbledore. Seated in the front row were the senior officials of the Ministry of Magic, Cornelius Fudge, Amelia Bones, Barty Crouch, and Dolores Umbridge. Behind them sat directors of various functional offices, along with celebrities and leaders from all walks of life in the magical world. Atticus Blaine hesitated for a moment, unsure of where he should sit. Fortunately, Amelia waved him over. "Come here, Atticus." The Wizengamot had its own unique rules, and Atticus knew the first row was not meant for him. However, Fudge smiled and gestured for him to join. After a moment of contemplation, Atticus smiled confidently, ignoring the curious stares, and ascended the stairs to the high platform. The atmosphere was solemn. After taking a seat beside Amelia, he nodded to familiar faces but remained silent. Dumbledore surveyed the rows of seats behind him, ensuring everyone was present, before his gaze settled on Atticus. Barty Crouch, exuding a cold aura, was addressed gently by Dumbledore. "You'll be the host, Barty." Without a word, Barty Crouch stood and walked to the podium with a stern expression, allowing Dumbledore to take the vacated seat. "We begin now," Barty Crouch announced coldly, his voice tinged with disdain. Atticus, observing the reactions of the ministry's high-ranking officials, found the proceedings dull. The grand trial felt like a farce, with the victor already having claimed their spoils. Opposite the high platform was a room where prisoners were temporarily held. As Crouch announced the start, the iron gate of the small room clattered open, and iron bars slowly descended into the ground. Peter Pettigrew, bound with ropes and with at least 5 wands pointed at the back of his head, emerged. His time in captivity had left him emaciated, resembling a broomstick with few branches. As he stepped from darkness into the dim light, he trembled at the sight of Barty Crouch and the officials seated in the front row, sobbing quietly. If not for the wands compelling him forward, he might have collapsed. Atticus noticed the noise around them grow louder, with most people glaring at the disheveled Peter with anger, both for the Potters and for the deception they had endured. Beside him, Dumbledore sighed heavily, his once straight back now slightly hunched, as many watched his every move. A bearded wizard spoke angrily. "He deserves no pity, Albus." "I agree with you," Dumbledore replied, his blue eyes filled with sorrow. "But I can't pretend I'm not responsible, courtier. This should have been avoided." The surrounding discussions quieted, with some sighing heavily, and others casting mocking and disdainful glances at Dumbledore. At that moment, the sound of heavy stones grinding against each other came from the room Peter had exited, and Dawlish escorted Sirius out. After nearly a month, Sirius's complexion was much worse. Detained in the deepest part of the Ministry of Magic, deprived of sunlight, and subjected to relentless interrogations, it was impossible for anyone to remain in good spirits. Recently, the Daily Prophet had revealed the truth of the past, and everyone present knew of his innocence. The congressman's eyes were filled with curiosity rather than fear, with one exception, the moderator of the proceedings. The trial was underway, and Barty Crouch's voice rang out, "A lowly traitor, a shameless coward." The animosity was palpable, as the Ministry of Magic had been holding Sirius Black and Peter Pettigrew separately for days. Today marked the first time Sirius laid eyes on Peter since their capture. Overcome with rage, Sirius momentarily ignored Atticus Blaine, who had been trying to catch his eye from the stands. With a furious roar, he lunged at Peter, who was visibly terrified. However, Sirius's attempt to reach Peter was thwarted. The aurors guarding Peter swiftly turned their wands on Sirius, their expressions cold and unyielding. "If you disrupt the trial again, I will declare you guilty, Sirius Black." Barty Crouch's voice was icy as he met Sirius's fury, gaze with indifference. Both Sirius and Peter were restrained on stone chairs that had risen from the ground. The difference was that Peter was almost entirely ensnared by the chains that seemed to grow from the chair itself. "Trial on February 27th, Barty Crouch announced, opening the folder before him. Despite knowing that his reputation might suffer after today, he stood firm and resolute. Interrogators: Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, President of the International Confederation of Wizards and Headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry; Cornelius Oswald Fudge, Minister of Magic; Barty Crouch, Director of International Magical Cooperation; Amelia Susan Bones, Director of Magical Law Enforcement; and Senior Undersecretary Dolores M. Umbridge. Trial transcript member, Eric Munch. Atticus Blaine raised an eyebrow in surprise, noticing Eric sitting in an inconspicuous corner, his lips trembling with excitement. Defendant, Peter Pettigrew, Barty Crouch continued, shifting his gaze from the folder to Peter, who was slumped in his chair like a worm. You stand accused of revealing the Potter's whereabouts to a mysterious figure in October 1981, directly leading to their deaths. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Peter, far from mounting a defense, appeared lost in his own world, shrinking away from Sirius as much as possible. The person previously charged with this crime was Sirius Black, a witch from the back row of the trial seats interjected, raising her hand. Her question drew the attention of many, including Dumbledore. She nodded and smiled at him before asking, "Mr. Dumbledore, you previously provided evidence that Sirius was the Potter's secret keeper. Now, the Ministry of Magic is prosecuting Pettigrew for leaking their whereabouts. We need clarification on what transpired." Though the Ministry had uncovered the truth, protocol required either Peter or Sirius to explain to the jury. With Peter unable to speak, Sirius stood, his voice strained as he recounted. When we learned that Voldemort was planning to kill James and Lily, Dumbledore suggested using the Fidelius charm to protect them. James trusted me more and decided not to trouble Dumbledore, making me their secret keeper. But at the last moment, I suggested this lowly traitor take my place. Everyone knew I was the Potter's best friend. I feared that if I became the secret keeper, the mysterious figure would anticipate it, so I advised James and Lily. Sirius's voice caught in his throat, unable to continue, but the jury members pieced together the story. The fact that Peter Pettigrew was alive had already resolved many questions, but the Wizengamot required concrete evidence, not mere speculation. It's a recorded statement, a solid statement we obtained using Veritaserum, the proceedings continued, as the truth began to unfold. During the interrogation, after the Auror office had apprehended Peter Pettigrew, Dawlish, who was standing in line to guard Pettigrew, presented the magically recorded confession to the jury. This confession clarified most of the lingering doubts, detailing the entire process of how Pettigrew leaked the secret to the Dark Lord, how he managed to escape when pursued by Sirius, and how he remained hidden for the past 12 years. The revelations left most members of the Wizengamot jury feeling deeply unsettled. It was hard for them to reconcile the image of the trembling, terrified Pettigrew, curled up in his chair, with the heinous acts he had committed. "Arthur doesn't know," Atticus Blaine overheard someone whispering behind him. "It's so dreadful. I bet Arthur won't let a single mouse stay in the house once he finds out." End of this chapter. Chapter 358, Kill or Close. Veritaserum is a potion strictly controlled by the Ministry of Magic, prohibited even in the interrogation of ordinary prisoners. It is only permitted for use on criminals and dark wizards who pose a significant threat to the magical world, and only after approval from Leah Burns and Cornelius Fudge. The potion's reliability is unquestionable. When Peter's trembling voice echoed in the courtroom, the room fell silent, leaving no doubt in anyone's mind. Atticus Blaine initially thought this formal trial would conclude at this point. However, unexpectedly, Barty Crouch spoke again. "Peterina Pettigrew, you will also face a second charge from the Ministry of Magic. Last November, for reasons unknown, you left Ron Ignatius Weasley, who is currently studying at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and hid in the school's owlery. There, you used the Imperious Curse to control a third-year student, Draco Malfoy, for 3 months, causing him serious harm." Barty Crouch leaned forward, his eyes piercing Peter Pettigrew like an eagle's. Currently, Draco Malfoy is still receiving treatment at St. Mungo's Hospital for magical injuries. Atticus frowned, his fingers twitching as he cast a spell to ensure his voice reached only Dumbledore. "Bringing this up is like admitting our failure, Headmaster Dumbledore." Dumbledore's silver-white eyebrows twitched slightly, and he replied calmly, without turning his head, "We must acknowledge, Atticus, that Hogwarts did not adequately protect its students. If people blame us for this, we must accept it." Atticus snorted, a glint of light flashing in his eyes as he stared at Barty Crouch's back. Fudge and Burns seemed caught off guard. This probably wasn't a planned accusation. Was it Lucius Malfoy? Did he bribe Barty Crouch to add more charges against Peter? Atticus appeared indifferent. If this were true, Lucius Malfoy had acted foolishly. Having already spoken to him, Lucius should have approached Barty Crouch privately. This behavior showed a lack of trust in Atticus, which he found contemptuous. Because of Draco, Lucius Malfoy couldn't bear the thought of Peter avoiding Azkaban, so... "If you knew Barty Sr. as I do, you wouldn't make such assumptions," Dumbledore interrupted Atticus. Sirius's mistakes were a significant blemish on Barty Sr.'s record, second only to the disgrace his son brought him. Connolly wanted Barty Sr. to shoulder the Ministry of Magic's mistakes, but a wizard like Barty Sr. would not accept his reputation being tarnished. Atticus blinked, understanding. As a high-ranking official of the Ministry of Magic, having a son who was a Death Eater was damaging enough. The misjudgment in Sirius's case had earned him the reputation of being a fool, but Barty Crouch was not content with that. He wanted to do something noteworthy to regain support. As Atticus had anticipated, Barty Crouch continued. Peter Pettigrew, accused of revealing the Potter's whereabouts to a dark figure, leading to their murder, accused of killing multiple muggles, accused of using the Imperious Curse to control underage wizards, combined punishment for several crimes, it is recommended that you be sentenced to death. When Barty Crouch's cold voice echoed through the courtroom, the massive stone chamber fell into a prolonged silence. Many stared at Barty Crouch's resolute back in disbelief, including Sirius Black below. During his detention by the Ministry of Magic, Sirius had come to realize that Peter had likely saved his most precious life. So many Death Eaters. In the past, those who committed numerous crimes were sentenced to life imprisonment in Azkaban. It was highly unlikely that the Wizengamot would make an exception for Peter. However, Barty Crouch, who had personally sent him to Azkaban, now suggested that the jury should sentence Peter to death. Sirius stared at Barty Crouch in astonishment, unsure whether to despise him or thank him. "Wait, Barty, this isn't what we agreed upon. According to the law, it should be imprisonment." Fudge Feff. Inolli regained his composure, rising from his seat. He leaned forward, his lips moving quickly as he spoke. The impact of Crouch's suggestion rippled through the courtroom, causing an uproar unlike anything Atticus Blaine had witnessed since entering. Contrary to expectations, there were few supporters of the death penalty. Many wizards and onlookers were flushed with emotion, debating whether Peter should face death or life imprisonment. "What is your opinion, Dumbledore?" Fudge, wiping sweat from his brow, turned to Dumbledore for guidance. Such a severe punishment as the death penalty had not been seen in years. If Pettigrew Peter were to be executed, it would reflect poorly on Fudge, the current Minister of Magic. "Now, let the jury vote." Barty Crouch, aware of Fudge's attempt to involve Albus, swiftly called for a vote. Peter, his mind finally clearing, covered his face, unable to watch as hands were raised one by one. The sound of his cries was sharp and piercing. None of those seated in the front row, including Atticus, revealed their intentions. This was merely a performance, and Barty Crouch never truly expected the Wizengamot to pass a death sentence for Peter. He simply wanted to demonstrate his firm stance against evil. "Very well, a show of hands in favor of the life sentence for Peter Pettigrew," Barty Crouch announced with a stern expression. This time, the majority supported the proposal. Peter howled, this time with joy rather than fear. He had survived, and even in a dreadful place like Azkaban, as long as he was alive, there was hope. Peter was escorted away by several Aurors. With the trial's conclusion, they would immediately carry out the Wizengamot's decision, taking Peter to the Department of Mysteries on the 9th underground floor, where a portkey to Azkaban awaited. Fudge exhaled in relief. The death penalty had been averted, and the Ministry of Magic under his leadership would not face criticism for it. He offered Barty a strained smile, signaling the end of the trial. Yet Barty Crouch had another surprise in store. Ignoring Fudge's cue, he turned to Sirius Black, who was filled with regret and spoke with disdain. His sudden declaration left the jury members, who had just begun to relax, stunned. "Sirius Black, you will be charged with illegally studying and using the animagus." Chapter 359, A Fierce Confrontation. The Ministry of Magic's primary concern in recent events is not Sirius Black's innocence, nor the revelation that Peter Pettigrew, once awarded the Order of Merlin and celebrated as a hero, is the true criminal. Instead, the Ministry is most troubled by Sirius Black's escape from Azkaban. Azkaban, guarded by the fearsome Dementors, serves as a formidable tool of control for the Ministry. It instills fear even in powerful wizards like Hagrid or Remus Lupin, who may not fear death, but certainly dread the prison and its guards. Now, the fact that a wizard has managed to escape from Azkaban, reputed to be inescapable, has shaken the very foundation of the Ministry's authority. Upon receiving Sirius from Atticus Blaine and Dumbledore, Fudge immediately tasked Rufus with addressing this issue. Barty Crouch, one of the top 3 officials in the Ministry, is deeply involved in this incident. He is privy to all the secrets surrounding these events, yet no one anticipated his unexpected retaliation. Dumbledore, however, seemed unfazed. Having watched these high-ranking officials grow under his guidance, he understood their likely responses in various situations. In contrast, Fudge's reaction was one of panic. We're finished, aren't we?" Fudge exclaimed angrily. "If we don't pursue this matter, it will be seen as 12 years of wrongful imprisonment." Amelia frowned, glaring at her old colleague, clearly frustrated by his unauthorized actions that contradicted their previous discussions. Barty Crouch, seemingly oblivious to the attention he had drawn, coldly addressed Sirius, who was caught off guard in the audience. "Sirius Black, I assume you are aware that the Ministry of Magic has laws regulating the dangerous transfiguration magic of the animagus, aren't you?" "Yes, I know," Sirius replied, frowning. He glanced at Dumbledore and Atticus Blaine behind Barty Crouch, noting their calm demeanor. It seemed they were not surprised by Barty's deviation from protocol. This realization helped Sirius regain his composure, and he met Barty Crouch's gaze without flinching. "Did you know that the first transformation of an animagus must be supervised by the Ministry of Magic, and if successful, must also be registered?" "Yes, I know." Did you know that violating this regulation could lead to prosecution by the Ministry of Magic? Yes, I know. When did you master this magic? At 16, when I was at Hogwarts. Barty Crouch paused his aggressive questioning, and the jury was taken aback by Sirius's response. The difficulty of animagus magic is among the highest of all transfiguration spells. Sirius, along with Pettigrew, who had just been exposed, had successfully mastered it through sheer determination, marking them as true prodigies. The quality of teaching at Hogwarts is commendable, Albus, someone in the crowd remarked, giving Dumbledore a thumbs up. Thank you for the compliment, but Hogwarts didn't assist them much in this matter, Dumbledore replied with a playful smile. While most were amazed by Sirius's magical talent, a few astute individuals in the courtroom realized why Barty Crouch had chosen to revisit these years-old events during Peter's trial, when public attention was at its peak. At the time of Sirius's arrest, Barty Crouch was the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, admired for his firm stance against dark forces. It was Atticus Blaine who ordered Sirius to be thrown directly into Azkaban, bypassing the necessary trial procedures. Barty Crouch placed both hands on the table, leaned forward, and looked down at Sirius. His meticulously groomed mustache curled slightly as he spoke. Sirius Black, you were sent to Azkaban to serve a life sentence 12 years ago after being identified by the Ministry of Magic as the murderer of the Potters. During this time, did you ever reveal to anyone that you were not the Potters' secret keeper? No, I was, Sirius began, realizing something was amiss. He wanted to avoid the question, but found himself unable to withstand the intense scrutiny of a high-ranking Ministry of Magic official. Excuse me. Barty Crouch's expression was stern. Is it to be understood that you knew you were innocent, but chose not to explain it to anyone? Was it because you feared the Wizengamot Tribunal would conduct a thorough investigation and expose you as an illegal animagus? That's not the case at all, Sirius finally roared. I didn't speak up because I thought I was guilty. I mean, I felt responsible for James and Lily's deaths due to my foolish advice. I believed I needed forgiveness. That's what I thought. Dumbledore sighed helplessly. Sirius's thoughts and actions were indeed unconventional. Although Peter's innocence had now been proven, Sirius' own confession held little weight in the eyes of most Wizengamot members. Dumbledore stood up, ready to intervene, but Atticus Blaine gently held his arm and shook his head subtly. There's no need to intervene, Headmaster. Someone will handle it. I object. As soon as Atticus finished speaking, Ms. Bones stood up. Her brows were furrowed deeply, and the monocle in her eye socket left red marks. Amelia Bones stared sternly at Barty Crouch, who was looking back at her. Your question is seriously misleading, and your conclusion lacks a reliable factual basis, Mr. Crouch. The courtroom erupted in an uproar, with jurors staring in disbelief at the two senior Ministry of Magic officials confronting each other. This was already a significant political incident. In the Wizengamot trial court, under the watchful eyes of many non-voting members, the heads of two departments, considered the right and left hands of the Minister of Magic, were openly at odds. The impact of this incident was severe. Sweat dripped from Fudge's forehead, his cheeks flushed and swollen. Barty, I think Amelia's point is valid, you. Barty Crouch stood straight, his eyes bulging. I see no issue with my questions and conclusions, Miss Bones. As we all know, no one is unafraid of Azkaban and its guards. Sirius Black concealed the truth about the Potters' deaths. The only possibility is that he harbors a deeper guilt, and his status as an outlaw animagus proves he is not a decent wizard. His statements are not credible. As head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, Ms. Bones, you should have a keen eye for crime. I suggest the Ministry re-examine Sirius Black to uncover what he is hiding. This is ridiculous, Fudge panted heavily, shaking his head. I know what you're trying to do, Barty. You want to justify sending Black to Azkaban 12 years ago, but this is a serious slander, Minister Fudge, Barty Crouch interrupted, raising his head to address the jury above, who were murmuring among themselves. Each syllable he uttered was filled with cold anger. Some may think I'm seeking personal vengeance, but everyone should remember that throughout my long career, there is ample evidence that I have always loathed and despised lawbreakers. Of course, I do not wish to hide. My decision regarding the deaths of the Potters and sending Sirius Black to Azkaban was a mistake, Crouch declared, his eyes gleaming with intensity as he addressed everyone in the courtroom. In light of this, I am taking responsibility and hereby announce my immediate resignation from the Wizengamot Tribunal. However, I urge you all to seriously reconsider what I have just expressed about Sirius Black himself. End of this chapter. Chapter 360, Peter's Death. Barty Crouch's eloquence left many, including Cornelius Fudge, overwhelmed. In previous negotiations, the idea of excluding Barty Crouch from the Wizengamot Tribunal had been discussed. However, this was to be addressed only after the trial of Peter Pettigrew concluded and the dust settled. The ministry planned to sway public opinion to hold Barty Crouch accountable for the wrongful trial of Sirius Black. This exclusion was meant as a punitive measure, a gesture to appease the magical community. Yet, unexpectedly, Barty Crouch announced his withdrawal from the Wizengamot right in the courtroom. What a cunning move. If it weren't for the inappropriate timing, Atticus Blaine might have applauded Crouch's audacity. Some of Barty Crouch's actions today couldn't deceive the truly astute, but he managed to maintain public favor and approval within the ministry and the magical world. This was his strategy for a potential comeback. Even Atticus found himself contemplating whether a minister of magic with such a personality might be more inspiring in times of war. However, he quickly dismissed this thought. While Barty Crouch was indeed tough and intelligent, his arbitrary nature made him difficult to influence. In contrast, Amelia Bones seemed more likely to value Atticus's opinions. Barty Crouch strode out of the courtroom, leaving the Wizengamot members in silent contemplation. "Hey, don't go, Crouch!" Sirius, thinking Crouch was targeting him, leapt from his seat and shouted angrily at Crouch's retreating figure. "I didn't lie, and I didn't commit any evil crimes. I just wanted justice for James and Lily's death." Sirius. Neither Dumbledore nor Atticus wanted to get entangled in the Ministry of Magic's fierce political struggles, but they couldn't stand by and watch Sirius being sent to Azkaban. On this occasion, Dumbledore's voice carried weight. As he stood, everyone knew he was there to make the final decision. Dumbledore ordered Sirius to remain silent, then turned to face the trial seat. Regarding Mr. Barty Crouch's final allegations, as far as I know, after Sirius was detained by the Ministry of Magic, he was interrogated by the Auror office for 3 weeks. The interrogation process did not reveal any egregious criminal facts about Sirius, Dumbledore stated calmly, looking at Ms. Bones. Amelia knew it was her turn to speak. She addressed the jury. "Albus is correct. The experienced Aurors in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement used various interrogation methods, excluding veritaserum and memory extraction, to confirm that Sirius Black did not break the law, aside from being an unregistered animagus." "Thank you." Dumbledore nodded politely at Ms. Bones and continued, "I don't believe Sirius Black bears legal responsibility in the matter of the Potters. Of course, we acknowledge that he is an unlicensed animagus. Has the Ministry decided to pursue charges for that, Connolly?" "What? Oh, animagus, we decided not to prosecute Albus. But, well, we'll impose a fine," Connolly stammered, still flustered by Crouch's performance. "So," Dumbledore raised his voice, consulting loudly, "now, a show of hands. Those who believe Sirius Black is not guilty and should be free of all charges, please raise your hands." Dumbledore immediately raised his hand, followed by Atticus, Amelia, and Fudge. A ripple of agreement spread across the trial seat as wizards from the first row began to raise their hands in support. The rows of seats filled with spectators began to rise one by one, each person raising their hand in succession. Sirius swallowed hard as he stood on the stage, his heart pounding with each hand that went up. When he first emerged from Azkaban, he was indifferent to the idea of revenge or freedom. However, the time spent with Remus and Atticus Blaine had gradually rekindled his enthusiasm for life. He had responsibilities now, especially to James and Lily's child, little Harry, who was waiting for him to take care of him. 42 seats in favor, 0 abstentions. Eric Monk, H., who had been transferred due to Atticus, announced the results with a slightly trembling voice. "Wonderful," Dumbledore exclaimed cheerfully, glancing at Sirius, who was flushed with excitement in the audience. "Acquitted of all charges, you have been cleared by the Wizengamot, Sirius." "Oh, thank you." Sirius grinned, his smile nearly as wide as his canine form, and he clenched his fist, shaking it vigorously. As Dumbledore declared Sirius's innocence, the heavy and solemn atmosphere of the courtroom suddenly lightened, and many members' eyes returned to the curiosity they had initially shown towards Sirius. Some were eager to converse with him, given his status as the only direct descendant of the Black family and a natural nobleman. However, Atticus Blaine reached Sirius Black first. "Congratulations on your freedom, Sirius," Atticus said, patting his shoulder with a smile. "Thanks to you, Atticus?" Sirius replied gratefully, pursing his lips. "If it weren't for you finding me in the Shrieking Shack, I don't know what would have happened." "I hope you'll act more rationally in the future," Atticus advised. At that moment, Dumbledore finished his conversation with Fudge and approached them, smiling gently. "I visited St. Mungo's before coming here. Remus is very concerned about you. I think you should meet him later and share the good news." "I will, Dumbledore," Sirius replied, his voice filled with excitement. "It's a relief not to have to hide anymore. This outcome is truly gratifying. Of course, Peter is still alive." Clang! The trial concluded, and as the members of the Wizengamot began to leave after exchanging pleasantries, the heavy iron door of the courtroom suddenly swung open with a bang. Under the astonished gaze of everyone, Dawlish, who had just escorted Peter Pettigrew away, burst in. His robe was tattered, his face smeared with mud, and blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. He looked terrified. Atticus's eyelids twitched slightly, and the corners of his mouth moved imperceptibly. "Peter Pettigrew is dead." Dawlish's words were like a boulder thrown into a pond, causing an uproar. Many people began questioning him simultaneously, and Fudge leaped off the high platform, rushing to Dawlish and grabbing him by the collar, shaking him frantically. "Calm down, Cornelius!" Dumbledore left the dazed Sirius and strode over to Dawlish, speaking in a calm voice. "Please tell us what happened, Dawlish. Could it be that the Dementors in Azkaban are out of control?" No, not Azkaban," Dawlish stammered, still in shock. "We had just escorted Peter to the room with the portkey in the Department of Mysteries, intending to take him to Azkaban. Someone tampered with the portkey. The other end wasn't Azkaban, but a barren mountain ridge." As he spoke, Dawlish's eyes widened in horror. "We realized something was wrong, and prepared to apparat away, but a giant skeleton as tall as a mountain appeared. It struck down, and we all managed to dodge, except Pettigrew Peter." Dawlish reached into his pocket with trembling hands and pulled out a bloody finger. "This is all that's left of him." End of this chapter.